The strange thing about Pokemon is how patient it is. It sits there all through your childhood, looking like the most harmless thing in the world, perfectly content to wait years, decades even, before it shows you what it really is. You grow up with it as this bright, friendly thing, a little creature in a red and white ball, a boy in a cap, a rival who's a bit of a git, some gym badges to go and collect. It's the wallpaper of a certain kind of childhood. Cheerful music, primary colours, a talking yellow mouse who refuses to go in his own ball. You put it down when you get older because it's for kids, and that's fair enough. That's what it was built to be. And then one day, usually completely by accident, you read one of the Pokédex entries properly. Not skim it, actually read it. And it tells you, in the same flat, chirpy little tone it uses to list a creature's height and weight, that the small ghost you've been carrying around in your bag is holding a mask that used to be its own face from back when it was a person, and that sometimes it takes the mask out and looks at it and cries, and something in you goes quiet. Because that is not wallpaper, that is something else entirely. I've spent an almost embarrassing amount of my life in that something else. Underneath the bright surface of Pokemon, tucked into the margins, and the throwaway lines, and the gravestones that nobody makes you read, there's this whole quiet ocean of lore. Creation myths that begin before the universe existed, a king who's been wandering the earth for 3,000 years because he couldn't let go of a single flower. Ghosts that used to be children who got lost in the woods. A scientist who built a monster out of grief and a fossilized eyelash. A professor who died and left behind a copy of themselves to say the goodbye they never quite managed while they were alive. None of it is hidden, not really, it's just under things. And most people who play the games never go looking for it, because they're busy having a perfectly nice time, catching frogs and battling their friends, which is a completely reasonable way to spend your time. I'm not knocking it, but that's what tonight's for. The going and looking. The plan for tonight, such as it is to potter through the whole strange lot of it. Gently. We can set off roughly where the world itself does, with an egg that hatched out of nothing, and then drift on through the regions and the gods and the ghosts and the lonely old men, in no hurry at all, stopping wherever something catches my eye. Nothing here is building towards a test. There is no grand reveal at the finish that you have to keep your eyes open for. Every little piece stands entirely on its own, so if you fade out part way through me explaining what antimatter has got to do with a dragon, that is not a problem in the slightest. If anything, that is rather the point of the whole exercise. So settle in properly. Fluff the pillow. Find the cool side of it. There is a little subscribe button lurking about somewhere, if you would like more of these to find you on the night sleep won't come. But honestly, tend to that another time, or never. It makes not the slightest difference to me. For now, it is just going to be the two of us, and a great many monsters, on and on, until you have stopped really listening at all. The egg first then. In the beginning, there was nothing. That's more or less how Sinnoh tells it, and I've always loved that the game just says it, flat out, no fuss. There's no dramatic music, no build-up. It's an old story, the kind an elderly hiker on a mountain will tell you if you stand still long enough, or the kind you find written on a plaque in a library that most players walk straight past. And it opens with the entirety of existence being empty. Before there was a universe, there was nothing at all. No time, no space, no light, no anywhere for any of it to happen. Just nothing. And then out of that nothing, there was an egg. Not a Pokemon egg, like the ones you hatch by cycling around in circles until your legs go numb. Something a great deal older and stranger than that. A single egg, sitting in a swirling vortex of pure chaos, in a nothingness that came before time itself. Which is a slightly dizzying idea if you sit with it, because an egg is a thing, and a thing needs somewhere to be, and there wasn't anywhere yet. But there it was anyway, and it hatched, and the creature that climbed out of it made the world. Its name is Arceus. And Arceus is, depending on how you want to look at it, either the single most powerful being in the entire franchise, or a genuine god. Full stop, no qualifiers. The old stories say it shaped the whole of the universe, the world, and the sky, and everything in between, using 1,000 arms. 1,000. I do enjoy that detail because it's the kind of thing that sounds like poetry, like the storyteller reaching for the biggest number they can think of to convey enormity. And then you look at how Arceus is drawn, this sort of pale, four-legged creature with a great golden wheel around its middle, and you think, well, where exactly are you keeping the 1,000 arms, mate? But that's myth for you. It's not meant to survive too much staring at. Here's a small thing I find lovely about the name. Arceus sounds an awful lot like Arceus, which is an old alchemical word. The alchemists, back when chemistry and magic hadn't quite finished separating from each other, used Arceus to mean a kind of life force, the invisible thing that gives shape and change to matter, the spark that turns a pile of stuff into a living, growing thing. And that is, near enough, exactly what Arceus is meant to be. The thing that gave form to everything. Somebody at the studio clearly knew what they were doing when they picked that name. It's not an accident. Now, the people who lived in the ancient region that Arceus supposedly made didn't call it Arceus. That's the modern name, the scientific-sounding one. The old people who worshipped it called it Almighty Sinnoh. Great Sinnoh, the might of Sinnoh. And here's the bit that always gets me. The region they lived in is called Sinnoh, so the place is named after the god, not the other way round. The land took the name of the thing that made it, which is the sort of detail you'd expect from a real culture, a real bit of history, and it's just quietly sitting there in a children's game about monster fights. There's a moment in one of the games where Arceus speaks, and when it does, it says something that I think about more than is reasonable. It says that Arceus is simply the name that humans call it, as if the name is a thing that happened to it, rather than a thing it is, as if it existed for an incomprehensibly long time before anyone was around to give it a label, and the label is a recent development, and a slightly beside the point one at that. There's something very old and very tired in that, if you read it the right way. The oldest creature in existence letting a much younger species decide what to call it, and not really minding. Then there are the plates. If you've played the games, you'll know these. Arceus can change its type, which is unusual. Most Pokemon are stuck being fire or water, or whatever they were born as. But Arceus can be any of them. Fire, water, grass, ghost, steel, dragon, the lot. And it does this by holding a plate, a sort of ancient stone tablet, one for each type, 16 or 17 of them depending on which game you're counting. And the lore says these plates came into being at the same moment Arceus did. They're not something it found later or was given. They're part of it, little shards of its own nature, scattered out, each one representing a fundamental element of the world. Which leads to the idea that I think is the strangest and most beautiful thing in the whole of Sinnoh's mythology. There's a hiker in the games, an ordinary chap, and he tells you something that nobody else seems to know. He says that every single Pokemon is a fragment of Arceus, that when Arceus made the world, it didn't just create life and step back. It sort of broke a piece of itself off into everything. So the little bird you catch in the first 10 minutes of the game, and the enormous legendary dragon you fight at the end, and the ghost with the mask, and the yellow mouse, all of them, every last one, they're all splinters of the same original creature, chips off the one god. And the thing is, the game hints later that this might be more than just one bloke's theory. It comes up again. It's treated quietly as possibly true. I don't know why that lands as hard as it does for me. Maybe it's the scale of it. Over 1,000 different creatures now across all the games, and the suggestion that they're all the same thing wearing 1,000 different faces, all the same as each other, and all the same as the god, and all the same as you, arguably, if you follow it far enough. Because there are humans in this world too, and where did they come from? The game doesn't push it that far, but it leaves the door open, which is worse in a way. Or better, I can never decide. There's a version of all this that gets a bit heavier, and I'll mention it and then move on, because we've got all night and no need to rush. In one telling, the egg that became Arceus was originally something even larger and more powerful, and what we know as Arceus is what was left over after it split off its first creations, which would make the god we've got a sort of remainder, a piece of an even older, even bigger thing that we never see and never will. I like that as an idea, and I don't fully trust it, and the games are cheerfully vague about it, so we can leave it as a maybe. The maybes are half the fun with this stuff. The lore is full of gaps, and the gaps are where you get to do your own thinking late at night when you should be asleep. What stays with me though is how casually all of this is delivered. This is a game where one of your main activities is feeding curry to your monsters and taking them to a fashion show, and tucked into the same game is a complete creation theology. An egg from nothing, 1,000 arms, a god that lets you name it, every creature a shard of the divine. It's the same trick as the ghost with the mask, really. Enormous ideas sitting quietly in the background, while the foreground gets on with being colourful and daft. You have to be the sort of person who reads the plaques. And if you're listening to this, I suspect you might be. So that's the beginning. The egg, the nothing, the 1,000 arms, the god that broke itself into everything. But there's a catch to making a universe. It turns out Arceus didn't do it alone. Before it made the world, before it made the plates, it made 3 others first. 3 creatures to hold up the pillars of reality. 1 for time, 1 for space, and 1 for the strange dark stuff underneath both. And one of those 3 went so badly wrong, so early on, that it got banished to a place where time doesn't even flow. Which is where I want to go next. There's a place in the Pokemon world where time doesn't flow, and space refuses to sit still. It's called the Distortion World, and it is one of the eeriest things the games have ever built. Waterfalls run upwards or sideways, or just stop halfway down and hang there. The ground drifts about above your head. Gravity turns out to be more of a polite suggestion than an actual rule, and you spend the whole time walking on surfaces that, logically, should not be under your feet. There's no day and no night because there's no time for a day to happen in. It's a broken mirror version of reality, and it exists for one specific reason. It's a prison, and the thing it was built to hold is one of the 3 oldest creatures in existence, sent there very early on for the crime of being a bit too much. Let me back up, because to explain the prisoner, I have to explain the other 2, and to explain all 3, I have to go back to the egg. So Arceus hatches out of the nothing, and before it gets round to making the world, it makes 3 others. 3 dragons near enough, though dragon is doing some heavy lifting there, and it makes them for a purpose. Each one is given control over a fundamental piece of how reality works. The first is Dialga, and Dialga is time, not a creature that can travel through time, though it can do that too. Dialga is time, in the way that a river is water. The old stories say that when Dialga was born, time itself began. It started moving. And here's the detail that I think is quietly one of the best in the whole franchise. As long as Dialga's heart keeps beating, time keeps passing. That's the mechanism. There's no grand cosmic clock somewhere. There's a heartbeat in the chest of an enormous steel blue dragon, and every beat is another moment. And if it ever stopped, so would everything else. Every second you've ever lived, every second you ever will, all of it is just this creature's pulse, ticking away in a dimension you'll never see. I find that a comforting thought to fall asleep to, oddly. Somebody's keeping the beat going. The second is Palkia, and Palkia is space. Where Dialga handles when things happen, Palkia handles where. The distance between 2 points. The room that things take up. The fact that you can be over here and the wall can be over there, and there's a gap in between the 2 of you. Palkia is that gap, and all the other gaps everywhere. The lore says space becomes more stable with every breath Palkia takes, which pairs beautifully with Dialga's heartbeat. One of them breathes to hold the room together. One of them beats to keep the clock running. And between the two of them, you get a universe you can move around in, somewhere to be, and a sequence of moments to be it in. That's most of what you need when you think about it. And then there's the third one. Giratina. Giratina got given antimatter, which is a slightly odd thing to hand to a creature, because antimatter isn't really a place or a flow, it's more of a contrary, an opposite. If Dialga and Palkia between them made all the matter, all the stuff, all the somewhere and somewhen, then Giratina is the counterweight to all of it, the other side of the coin, the undoing that has to exist for there to be a doing. And you can sort of see how a creature built out of that principle might come out a bit wrong, because Giratina, by all accounts, was violent. Not evil exactly, that's too simple, and I don't think the games ever call it evil. But dangerous, chaotic in a way the other two weren't. And so, quite early on, before the universe had even properly finished settling, Arceus banished it, sent it away to the distortion world, that broken dimension where time doesn't flow and space won't hold, and shut the door. And Giratina has been in there ever since, more or less, nursing what the games strongly imply is a very long, very cold grudge, which when you say it out loud is a bleak little family story. A creator makes 3 children to help hold up the world, and one of them turns out to be too much, and the solution is to lock it in a place outside of reality and get on with things. There's a version of that which is quite sad. The problem child sent to a room that isn't even part of the house. And Giratina's whole subsequent existence, the grudge, the occasional attempts to tear its way back in, all of it reads a bit differently once you frame it that way. It's not a monster attacking the world, it's the one that got sent away, trying to get back to the family that shut it out anyway. With the difficult child dealt with, Dialga and Palkia retreated to their own dimensions to get on with the business of being time and space, and Arceus turned to the actual work of making the world. But it did one more clever thing first, which I love, because it's the move of somebody who has learned from experience. It made a backup plan. Arceus created 3 more creatures, small ones this time, the Lake Guardians, and it hid one in each of 3 lakes and gave them a job. If Dialga or Palkia ever lost the plot, ever went berserk and started warping time or shredding space, the Lake Guardians could calm them down, bring them back to themselves. They're the emergency brake on the 2 most powerful forces in the universe, 3 little fairy things sitting quietly at the bottom of 3 lakes, waiting for a call that hopefully never comes. Which is a lovely bit of cosmic infrastructure, honestly. Even the gods keep a fire extinguisher. But the Lake Guardians got given a second job, and this is where it gets properly strange. Because the legends say they didn't just calm the dragons, they made the minds of every human in the world. There are 3 of them, Uxie, Mesprit and Azelf, and between them, the story goes, they handed out the 3 things that make a person a person. Uxie gave humanity knowledge, the ability to learn, to remember, to know things. Mesprit gave emotion, the ability to feel, to be moved, to have your day ruined or made by something small. And Azelf gave willpower, the ability to want, to decide, to do a thing rather than just sit there. Knowledge, feeling, and will. And the idea is that without all 3 of them, a person wouldn't be a person at all. There's even a bit in the games where, if these 3 are threatened, the implication is that everyone's minds would sort of switch off. The knowledge and the feeling and the will would drain out, and you'd be left with something that walks around, but isn't really anybody. So the thing that gave you the capacity to feel anything at all is a small blue creature at the bottom of a lake that most people in the world have never seen and don't believe in. That's the setup. That's what's underneath the cheerful game about catching frogs. Now, humans being humans, they got the story a bit wrong, which is the part that makes it feel real to me. Long, long after all this, there were people living in the ancient region that would one day be called Sinnoh, and they knew there was a god. They knew about Almighty Sinnoh, the great creator, but they'd never seen it, because Arceus keeps itself well hidden. What they had seen occasionally were the dragons. And so two groups of people, two clans, each latched onto a different one. One clan saw Dialga, the time dragon, and decided that was the almighty Sinnoh, the god who made everything. The other clan saw Palkia, the space dragon, and decided that was the almighty Sinnoh. And then inevitably, because this is what people do, the two clans fell out about it. Each was completely certain that the other was worshipping a false god, that the other lot had it wrong, were praying to a pretender, an imposter, and they quarrelled about it, bitterly, for a very long time, the way people will quarrel about exactly this sort of thing. It escalated. It got ugly. It went on until, more or less, both sides had worn themselves down so thoroughly that neither had the strength to keep fighting, and they settled into an uneasy sort of truce, not because they'd resolved anything, just because they were too knackered to carry on. And the tragedy of it, if you know the actual story, is that they were both wrong and both a little bit right. Neither Dialga nor Palkia was the creator. They were both made by the creator, brothers in a sense, equals, working together to build the universe. Two halves of the same job. And these two groups of people spent generations hating each other over which half was the real god, when the real answer was standing behind both of them the whole time, hidden, watching, and probably a bit disappointed. That's such a human thing. To be handed a mystery too big to hold, and to grab the nearest piece of it, and decide your piece is the whole thing, and then to fight to the death with the person who grabbed a different piece. We do it constantly. It's oddly moving to find it sitting there in a game, told without any judgment, just laid out. Here's what people did. Draw your own conclusions. The place where the dragons could come back into the world, if they ever needed to, is a spot at the very top of the tallest mountain in the region. Spear Pillar, it's called, a ring of ancient ruined columns right at the summit, built by the old people as a sort of doorway. And there's a whole modern storyline about a man who climbs up there and uses a special chain to drag the dragons out and try to remake the universe into something colder and emptier, without spirit, without all that messy feeling and wanting that the late guardians handed out. He fails, obviously. These people always fail. But it tells you something that the ancient doorway is still up there, still functional, still waiting, thousands of years after the clan stopped fighting. The infrastructure of creation, left standing on a mountaintop, gathering snow. I could sit in the Sinnoh myths all night, honestly. They're the deepest well the franchise has got. But the whole point of tonight is to wander, not to dig one hole. So let's leave the god and the dragons and the lakes behind, because Sinnoh tells the grandest version of how the world got made, the full cosmic story, gods and dimensions, and the minds of humanity. But it's not the only version. Other regions tell it much smaller, and in one of them the world wasn't spoken into being by a god at all. It was shaped slowly and violently by two enormous animals having the longest and most destructive argument in history, while a third one watched from the clouds and tried very hard to stay out of it. Picture the very early world. Before there were people, before there were towns or roads or any of the small comfortable things we build. Just a young planet, sloshing about, half water and half raw churning land, and enormous amounts of natural energy pouring through all of it, the way heat pours off something that's only just cooled enough to touch. And in that world, two things wake up. One of them comes up out of the deep earth. It's called Groudon, and it's essentially the planet's crust given a body and a temper. Red, vast, ridged like cooling lava, radiating heat. And when Groudon moves, land rises. Continents push up out of the water. Mountains shoulder their way into the sky. Groudon's whole nature is expansion, the raising up of solid ground, the making of somewhere dry to stand. The other comes up out of the deep sea, Kyogre, and Kyogre is the ocean, in the same way Groudon is the land. A colossal blue creature, all fins and flow, that rose up under the pressure of the deepest water there is. And where Groudon raises the land, Kyogre raises the sea. It expands the oceans. It cools the rain. It fills every low place with water and then reaches for the high places too. You can probably see the problem already, because these two are, in the most literal sense possible, working against each other. One of them is trying to make more land, the other is trying to make more sea, and there's only so much planet to go round. For a while, the stories say, they didn't even notice each other. Groudon got on with raising continents, Kyogre got on with filling oceans, each of them just following its nature in its own corner of a very big world. But it couldn't last, and there's a lovely, almost offhand phrase the lore uses. It says a chance meeting turned them into rivals, a chance meeting. As if two forces of nature, the size of weather systems, simply bumped into each other one day and took an instant dislike. And that was that. What followed was not a battle so much as a geological event. When Groudon and Kyogre fight, the world reshapes itself around them. The land buckles up where Groudon strains, the sea heaves and floods where Kyogre answers. Droughts follow one of them and endless rain follows the other, and between them they can turn a green and living place into either a cracked desert or a drowned ruin, depending on who's winning that particular hour. The old people who lived through it couldn't do anything. That's stated quite plainly, and it's one of the bleaker lines in the mythology. In the face of that kind of power, people could do nothing. They just had to endure it and hope and watch their world get pulled apart between two creatures who weren't even angry at them, who barely knew they were there. And then the third one comes down out of the sky. Rayquaza. And Rayquaza is my favourite of the three, partly because of what it is and partly because of where it lives. It's a serpent, a long green ribbon of a thing, and it doesn't live on the land or in the sea. It lives up in the ozone layer, right at the top of the sky, in that thin, cold band of air that almost counts as space. And it's been up there for an unimaginably long time, drifting, feeding on nothing but water and stray particles, and the occasional meteorite that wanders past, which is such an odd and specific detail. A dragon that grazes on falling stars way up above the weather, ignoring the whole world beneath it, until the world beneath it gets loud enough to notice. The stories say Rayquaza came down and stopped the fight. Its power overwhelmed both of them, the Land Maker and the Sea Maker, and forced them apart and sent them back down into sleep. Groudon into a cavern deep in the earth, Kyogre into a cavern deep in the sea. And with the two of them quieted, peace came back to the world, and things grew, and eventually people could build without watching it all get torn down again. The region that all this happened in is called Hoenn, and Hoenn, near enough, is the shape the fight left behind. The land and the sea settled into the outline they'd wrestled themselves into, and that outline is the map you walk around on. So that's the first time. But there's a second time, and the second time is the one I want to sit with, because it's got a detail in it that I think is quietly one of the most romantic ideas in the whole franchise. 1,000 years ago, roughly, a meteoroid hit the Earth, a big one. It struck hard enough to punch a crater into the ground, a crater that people would later build a whole city inside, a city called Sutopolis that sits in a ring of stone with the sea in the middle. And the impact cracked the Earth open, and out of those cracks poured the old natural energy, the same stuff that had woken the two giants the first time. And so they woke again, Groudon and Kyogre, roused out of their long sleep by a falling rock, and immediately, without missing a beat, back at each other's throats. The stories say they fought this time for 20 days and 20 nights, and the world came close to ending. Not metaphorically, close to being torn apart. Now by this point, there were people, and crucially, there were people who remembered. Not personally, of course, nobody lives 1,000 years, well, almost nobody, we'll get to him later. But culturally, there was a group, the Draconid people, who had kept the memory alive across all those generations. The memory of how, long ago, when the land and the sea tried to destroy each other, something came down out of the sky and saved them. And so, faced with the same catastrophe their ancestors had faced, they did the only thing they could. They wished, they remembered, and they hoped, and they called out for the Saviour to come again. And here's the detail. The law says that this collective wish, the accumulated longing of an entire people who remembered being saved, combined with the power of a meteorite, and that combination was what allowed Rayquaza to mega-evolve for the very first time, to become something even greater than it already was, not through training, not through some item a scientist cooked up in a lab, through being wished for, through a whole people looking up at the sky and needing it to be true, and that need being answered. I think that's beautiful, and I don't say that about a lot of things. The idea that the first mega-evolution in history, this huge transformative power that later games build entire mechanics around, happened because people believed hard enough that the sheer weight of a shared memory was a kind of fuel. It reframes Rayquaza from a powerful animal into something closer to a prayer that answers, a thing that gets stronger the more it's needed and remembered. And it worked. Rayquaza came down, transformed, calmed the two giants once more, and the world held together. There's a shrine, and there's a tall tower called the Sky Pillar, built by the Draconids, and the Sky Pillar is where you can climb up to summon Rayquaza if the worst ever comes again. It's the same idea as Spear Pillar back in Sinnoh, funnily enough, a structure left standing by ancient people so their descendants could call for help. Humanity keeps building these. Doorways and towers and summoning points, little bits of infrastructure aimed at the divine, on the off chance we need it again. There's something quite touching about that as a habit. We build churches, near enough except the god turns up. The three of them together represent the three big pieces of the planet, if you want the tidy version. Kyogre is the sea, the water, all of it. Groudon is the land, the rock, the solid ground. And Rayquaza is the sky, the air, the thin high edge of everything. Between them, they're the whole world, divided three ways, and the whole world is what's at stake when the first two fall out and the third one has to come down and sort it. What stays with me when I think about Rayquaza is the loneliness of the job. It lives up there in the cold at the top of the sky, alone, eating stardust for centuries at a stretch, and it only ever comes down for the worst possible reason. It's never woken up because something nice is happening. Nobody climbs the Sky Pillar to invite Rayquaza to a party. It descends into chaos, does the one terrible necessary thing, and goes back up to the quiet and the cold to wait for the next catastrophe. That's its entire existence. Peacekeeper is a lovely word until you realise it means you only ever show up when everything's already gone wrong. Still, it always comes. That's the comforting bit, if you want one, before you nod off. The land and the sea will keep going for each other, because that's their nature, and they can't help it. But the thing in the sky always comes down. Every time. It always has. Hoenn's world got shaped by three things that were always separate. Three forces that started apart and stayed apart. Land and sea and sky. Which makes it a nice contrast with the next one I want to tell you about, over in a region called Unova. Because Unova's oldest story is the exact opposite. It's about one thing that got pulled into two. A single dragon, split down the middle by an argument between brothers, and a cold leftover piece that's been waiting ever since to be made whole again. There's a story they tell in Unova, and it's shaped less like a creation myth and more like an old fairy tale. The kind with brothers in it. There are almost always brothers in these, and it almost always goes badly for at least one of them. Long ago, the story goes, there were two brothers, twin heroes, and they set out to build a nation together. And they had at their side a single dragon. One creature, enormous and powerful, that helped them raise up the land that would become Unova. And for a while, the three of them together, the two brothers and the one dragon, were a good team. They built something. They made a home. But the brothers wanted different things. And this is the heart of it. This is the bit the whole legend turns on. The older brother believed in truth, in what is. In facts, in reality as it stands, in seeing the world clearly and calling it what it is. And the younger brother believed in ideals, in what could be, in dreams, in aspiration, in the world as it ought to be, rather than the world as it happens to be right now. And you can hold both of those, if you're wise about it. Most good lives are some quiet negotiation between the truth of things and the ideal you're reaching for. But the brothers couldn't hold both. They each became certain that theirs was the only one that mattered. Truth against ideals, what is against what could be. And a disagreement became an argument, and an argument became a quarrel. And the quarrel went on and got colder and harder until the two of them, who had built a whole nation side by side, could not stand to be near each other. And the dragon, the one dragon that had helped them both, couldn't serve two masters who turned into enemies. So it split. It tore itself into two. Out of that single creature came two. Reshiram, white, who went to the brother who believed in truth, and Zekrom, black, who went to the brother who believed in ideals. Reshiram burns. It's got a great tail like a jet engine, and it commands fire, and it stands for truth and for one half of an old balance. Zekrom crackles. Its tail is a vast dark turbine, and it commands lightning, and it stands for ideals and for the other half. They're built as opposites, right down to the colours, white and black, fire and thunder. If you've ever seen the yin and yang symbol, the two teardrops chasing each other round a circle, that's the idea exactly. Two halves that only make sense together, that were only ever whole as a pair, now handed to two brothers who've forgotten how to be a pair themselves. And the brothers fought. Of course they did. With the two dragons, one each, truth against ideals, they went to war with each other. And I don't think the story bothers to tell you who won, because that's not the point. The point is that nobody won. That's what the split was. A single strong thing, torn in half by people who each wanted it to agree with them, and diminished by the tearing. But here's the part I find the strangest and the saddest, and it's the part people forget when they tell this story. Because everyone remembers Reshiram and Zekrom, the white one and the black one. Truth and ideals, two neat halves, but when a thing splits into two, there's usually a bit left over, a remainder. And there was. Its name is Kurem. Kurem is what was left when the original dragon tore itself apart. The husk, the empty shell. Grey and cracked and cold, with its wings frozen shut and its jaw iced over. A creature that looks like the leftover pieces of something that used to be complete. Where Reshiram got the truth and the fire, and Zekrom got the ideals and the lightning, Kyurem got neither. It got the absence. There's an old idea it's built on, Wuji, which is the state before yin and yang, the blankness before the balance divides into its two halves. Reshiram is one thing, Zekrom is the other thing, and Kyurem is the nothing they came out of, and the nothing that's left over. The gap in the middle of the yin and yang symbol, if you like. The part that isn't either colour. And Kyurem is cold, properly, dangerously cold. It generates this terrible freezing energy inside itself, so much of it that its own body freezes solid trying to contain it. It has to ice itself over just to keep from leaking out. And the lore says, and I love this, that Kyurem's true power exceeds both Reshiram and Zekrom. The leftover is stronger than either of the halves, but it's kept in check, held down, muffled by the sheer cold. All that power frozen in place, waiting. Waiting for what, though, is the interesting question. Because the stories say Kyurem is waiting for a hero who'll come and fill in the missing pieces, complete it, make it whole again with either truth or ideals. And there's a whole game mechanic where Kyurem can fuse back together with Reshiram or with Zekrom, drawing one of the split halves back into itself, as if the broken dragon has spent all this time, all these centuries frozen in a chasm, trying to become one thing again, trying to undo the split, reaching, in its slow frozen way, back towards the creature it was before the brothers pulled it apart. There's another version of Kyurem, mind you, a completely different one, told in a little town called Lacunosa, and the two versions don't agree at all, which is one of my favourite things about it. Because the people of Lacunosa don't tell you Kyurem is a leftover dragon at all. They tell you it fell out of the sky, that it's an alien near enough, that it crash-landed on the planet inside a meteor made of ice, and that the impact carved out a great chasm in the earth, and they tell you it's hungry. The old Lacunosa legend says that Kyurem would come out at night and devour anyone it found outside the walls of the town after dark, which is why, to this day, the people there have a custom of staying indoors once the sun goes down. A whole town's bedtime routine, built around a fear of a monster in the ice. And the game just gives you both, the split dragon version and the alien from the ice version, side by side, and never once tells you which is true. It might be a broken piece of the creature that made Unova. It might be a thing that fell out of space and eats people. It might, I suppose, be both somehow. The truth of it is frozen over, along with everything else. And I think that's the right way to handle a creature like that. Some things are better left as two contradictory stories that you get to hold at the same time, at 2:30 in the morning, deciding which one you believe. What I keep circling back to, with the Unova dragons, is how different it feels from everything we've talked about so far. Sinnoh gave us a god and a grand design. Hoenn gave us 3 forces of nature and a fight the size of the weather. And Unova gives us a family that fell apart. 2 brothers who loved each other, built a country together, and then let a difference of philosophy curdle into something that split a dragon in half and left a frozen remainder in a chasm to wait out the centuries alone. It's smaller than the others, more human. Nobody's a god here, they're just 2 people who couldn't agree, and the whole mythology of the region is the shape their disagreement left behind, which is, I think, a nice place to start turning the whole night in a slightly different direction. Because we've done the big cosmic stuff now. The gods, the dragons, the forces that made and shaped and split the world. And it's grand and it's lovely to think about. But it's a bit distant, isn't it? A bit far away. The lore I find myself thinking about when I can't sleep tends to be smaller and closer and a good deal sadder. And it usually doesn't start on a mountaintop or in the deep sea. It starts somewhere quiet and ordinary. A little town with a tower in it, where people go to bury the ones they've lost. Every region in Pokemon has a town that's a bit off, a bit quiet. And in the very first games, in the region called Kanto, that town is Lavender Town. It's a small place, purple roofed houses, not much to it. And the first thing you notice, if you're paying attention, is that it hasn't got a gym. Nearly every town has a gym. That's the whole rhythm of the games. You turn up, you battle the local expert, you get a badge, you move on. But not Lavender. There's no badge to win here. Because Lavender Town isn't that kind of place. It's the place where, for the first time in the whole game, a child playing it runs headlong into the idea that Pokemon can die. Because the thing Lavender Town has, instead of a gym, is a tower. The Pokemon Tower. 7 stories of it, and it's a graveyard. That's all it is, floor after floor of gravestones, and people standing quietly among them, mourning. You walk in expecting the usual, a puzzle, a boss, some item to grab, and instead you're in a place full of trainers who've come to bury their friends and sit with them a while. It's startling the first time. The music changes. The whole tone of the game drops out from under you. You've spent hours catching these creatures and stuffing them into balls and sending them out to knock each other over. And here, suddenly, is a building full of small graves, and the game just lets you stand in it. And there's a ghost in the tower. There's a ghost that won't rest. Here's what happened, and I'll tell it plainly, because it doesn't need dressing up. There's a species called Cubone, little things, quite sad-looking even at the best of times, that wear a skull as a helmet and carry a bone as a club. And there's what Cubone grows into, Marowak, the grown-up version. And before you ever get to Lavender Town, a mother Marowak and her baby Cubone were living quietly somewhere, the way animals do, when Team Rocket found them. Team Rocket are the crooks of the first games, and they'd discovered that Cubone skulls were worth money. So they went after the child, to take it and sell the skull. And the mother did what a mother does. She put herself between them and her baby and told the child to run, and the child ran. and one of the rocket grunts, furious at being stood up to by an animal, beat the mother to death in a game rated for children. That happened. It's not implied, it's not left vague. She was protecting her kid, and they killed her for it, and the kid got away and grew up an orphan. And her ghost went to the tower, and it wouldn't leave. That's who's haunting Lavender Town, not a monster, a murdered mother who died protecting her child and can't move on because she doesn't know if the child is safe. She's stuck, circling, unable to rest until she knows the one thing she died to protect made it. And here's the mechanic, which is one of the cleverest, creepiest things the old games ever did. When you first meet this ghost in the tower, you can't fight it. You can't even see it properly. The game just tells you your Pokemon is too scared to move. That's it. You send out your strongest creature, the one that's carried you through the whole game, and it's frozen, useless, too frightened to lift a claw because the thing in front of it isn't a normal opponent. It's a ghost, and there's a wrongness to it that even a battle-hardened monster can feel. You have to go and find a special item, a sort of scanner called the Sylphscope, before you can even perceive what you're looking at. And when you finally can, when you switch it on, the shape resolves and you see her for what she is, the mother. And you understand. There's an old man in the town, Mr. Fuji, and he's one of the gentle ones. He looks after abandoned and orphaned Pokemon, takes them in, gives them somewhere to be. And he'd gone up into the tower to try to calm the mother's spirit, to soothe her, and he'd been taken hostage by Team Rocket for his trouble, because they'd set up shop on the top floor. So part of what you're doing when you climb that tower is rescuing a kind old man who went in unarmed to comfort a ghost. And the way it resolves, in the end, is that the child is brought to her. The orphaned Cubone comes to the tower, and the mother sees it, sees that it's alive, that it's safe, that it's being cared for. And that's enough. That's all she needed. She finds peace and she goes. She's finally able to move on to wherever it is they go, because the one question holding her here has been answered. Your kid's okay. You can rest now. I've thought about that story for a very long time, and it's held up. It was one of the first properly good bits of storytelling the franchise ever did, right there at the very start, buried in a game about collecting monsters. A ghost story that turns out to be a story about a parent's fear for their child outliving their own death. That's not a jump scare. That's not a haunted house. That's grief. The specific grief of a mother who can't stop worrying even after she's gone. And the game trusted a lot of 8-year-olds to carry that quietly, and a fair few of them have never quite forgotten it. Now worlds move on, as we've said before tonight, and the tower didn't stay a tower. By the time of the later games, set some years afterward, the Pokemon Tower had been knocked down. In its place they built a radio station. All those graves got moved quietly to a smaller building elsewhere in the town, tucked away, some of them apparently in secret chambers that only Mr. Fuji knows the location of. And the eerie music got replaced with something cheerful and poppy, because it's a radio station now, and radio stations don't play funeral dirges, which is such a real thing for a place to do. A site of enormous collective grief, paved over and turned into infrastructure. The sorrow relocated somewhere more convenient. A nice bit of pop music playing where the ghosts used to be. That's how it goes. The living need the space, and the dead get moved to a smaller room. It's not cruel exactly. It's just what happens to grief given enough time. It gets tidied away. I have to mention the music, because you can't really talk about Lavender Town without it. The original theme for the town is unsettling, thin, atonal, jangling, wrong-sounding in a way that gets under your skin. And it spawned one of the internet's most enduring pieces of folklore, the Lavender Town Syndrome story. The tale that the music contained high frequencies that supposedly drove Japanese children to harm themselves, that it had to be changed, that there was a cover-up. It's a creepypasta. It's not real. Made up, top to bottom, a campfire story for the internet age, but it stuck to the town like a burr, and it's kind of perfect that it did, because a haunted graveyard town accumulating its own ghost stories in the real world is exactly the sort of thing that should happen. What's true is a bit lovelier and a bit sadder. The composer built that theme out of sharp atonal notes on purpose, reaching for the sound of old traditional Japanese instruments, trying to make the place feel ancient and reverent, like a real shrine. It only sounds like horror to Western ears, because we don't have the reference for it. To the people it was written for, it was meant to sound like respect, like the music you'd play for the dead, which is, when you think about it, a much better story than the fake one. And I'll end on this because it ties a knot I quite like. Much later, in the region called Alola, they gave Marowak a new version of itself, a regional variant, and this Marowak is part ghost and part fire. It twirls its bone club like a flaming torch, like the fire dancers on a tropical beach, which is where the fire part comes from. That's Alola's whole vibe. But the ghost part. Why is it a ghost? There are plenty of directions they could have taken a beachside Marowak, and they made it a ghost. And a lot of people reckon it's because Marowak, at this point, simply is a ghost, in the collective memory of everyone who ever played those first games and climbed that tower. The species is inseparable from that mother, from that grief, from Lavender Town. It was the only typing that made any sense. The tragedy got so deep into what a Marowak is that it followed the creature all the way to a different region and a completely different design decades later, and turned up as a green flame on the end of a bone. Grief has a long reach, is what I'm saying. Longer than a tower, longer than a radio station, long enough to cross an ocean and change a species. That mother is just one ghost though, one story, one tower, one grave. But once you've had your eyes opened in Lavender Town, once you know to look, you start to notice something. The Pokédex, that cheerful little encyclopedia that's supposed to just tell you a creature's height and diet, is absolutely full of ghosts. And a startling number of them, if you read closely, used to be people. One thing that's always fascinated me about Pokemon, and I mean genuinely fascinated, kept me up more nights than I'd like to admit, is the Pokédex. On paper, it's the dullest possible thing. It's an encyclopedia, a little electronic guidebook that fills up as you catch creatures and gives you a paragraph on each one. Height, weight, a bit about its habits. The sort of thing you'd skim once and never look at again, except the people writing those paragraphs over the years have snuck in some of the most quietly horrifying writing in any game aimed at children, and they've done it in the flattest, most matter-of-fact tone imaginable. And once you start reading them, you can't stop. It's like a wildlife guide written by someone who knows something terrible and can only tell you sideways. The ghosts are the worst for it, or the best, depending on your temperament. Let me just walk you through a few, because they're perfect for this hour of the night. Start with Yamask. Little thing, dark and floaty, drifts about carrying a golden mask on its tail. Sweet enough looking. And the Pokédex tells you what the mask is. It says the mask is the face this creature had, back when it was a human being. And then it adds, in the same breath, that sometimes Yamask looks at the mask, at its own old face, and cries. That's the entry. That's what they wrote. This thing was a person once, and it still has its face, but only as an object it carries around, a keepsake of what it used to be, and it takes it out and weeps at it. Other versions of the entry say, these creatures came from the spirits of people buried in graves, and that they keep the memories of the lives they used to live. So it's not even a clean forgetting. It remembers being a person. It remembers, and it can't go back. And all it's got left is the mask and the memory and the crying. That's a lot to put in a wildlife guide. Then there's Phantump. And Phantump looks whimsical, honestly. A little tree stump with a face. Quite cute, the sort of thing you'd expect to be entirely harmless. And then you read that Phantump is what happens when a child gets lost in the forest and dies there, and their spirit takes hold of an old stump and is reborn as this, a dead lost child living on as a little wooden ghost. And the entries say their cries sound like eerie screams. And there's a detail that turns it from sad to unsettling, which is that Phantump has been known to imitate the voice of a child to lure people deeper into the woods, which means if you follow the logic that the way you get more Phantump is that the existing ones call out in a child's voice, and someone's child follows the sound and gets lost and dies and becomes another Phantump who will one day call out in a child's voice of its own. It's a loop, a sad little self-perpetuating loop in the trees. I think about that one when I'm walking somewhere wooded, which is probably not what the designers intended, but there we are. Gengar is the one that gets me though. Gengar's an old favourite, one of the very first ghosts in the games. This big grinning purple thing with a mouthful of teeth, and it's popular, it's on merchandise, it's a mascot practically. And then one of the entries tells you quite calmly that Gengar was once human, and that because it was human once, it's lonely, and it wants a companion. So it tries to make one, by taking the lives of other humans. That's the entry. It wants a friend so badly that it kills people to try and turn them into what it is. And when you break that down, it's not villainy, it's grief again, isn't it? It's loneliness that's gone somewhere terrible. This thing used to be a person, and it's alone, and it just wants somebody to be alone with. And the only way it knows how to make that happen is the worst possible way. There's another version of the entry, even bleaker, that just addresses you directly, the reader, and says that if you ever feel a sudden chill, that's a Gengar approaching, and there's no escaping it, and you should give up. That's it. Give up. The game telling you, in its little encyclopedia, that when this thing comes for you, it's already over, so don't bother. Cheerful stuff. And then there's Drifloon, which manages to be the most sinister of the lot precisely because it's the most adorable. Drifloon is a balloon, a little purple ghost balloon with a smiley sort of face and stringy limbs, and it drifts along looking for all the world like something a child would want to grab. Which is the whole problem, because the Pokédex says Drifloon grabs the hands of small children and tries to drag them away to the afterlife. That's its thing. It looks like a party balloon. A child reaches for it, and it tries to carry them off to the land of the dead. And then there's the detail that tips it over into pitch-black comedy, which is that Drifloon dislikes heavy children. Because it's a balloon, it's too weak to lift a bigger kid. So it specifically targets the small ones, the light ones, and the heavier children are, through no virtue of their own, simply too much of a lift. And another entry adds that if a Drifloon's body ever bursts, its soul spills out with a screaming sound. So it's a screaming balloon, full of a spilled soul that tries to abduct the lightest available child, in a game about friendship. I do love this franchise. I'll go a bit quicker through a few more, because the pattern's the thing here, not the details. Honedge is a sword, a possessed sword, born when a departed spirit takes up residence in an old blade, and if you're foolish enough to grab it by the hilt, it wraps a cloth round your arm and drains your life force until there's nothing left. Froslass, this elegant, icy thing, is said to be the soul of a woman who died in the mountains, in the cold. Spiritomb, which is a personal favourite of mine, isn't one spirit at all. It's 108 of them, 108 souls, all bound together and sealed inside a stone as punishment for their misdeeds, 500 years ago, and never let out. A prison the size of a keystone, with 108 guilty ghosts crammed inside. Kadabra, which isn't even a ghost, it's a psychic type, has an entry saying it was once an ordinary boy, a boy with strange powers he couldn't control, who woke up one morning, transformed into this creature, and never turned back. So every Kadabra you've ever seen might be a child who lost the ability to be a child. And there's one last thread that pulls it all together, the thoughts I want to leave you with before we move on. The wording of these entries changes from game to game. Sometimes an entry will state a thing as flat fact, this Pokemon was human, and sometimes the very same creature, in a different game, gets an entry that hedges. It's said to be legend's claim. There's a rumour that the certainty wobbles, and this has led a lot of people to a rather elegant conclusion, which is that the Pokédex isn't the voice of God in this world. It's a document written by researchers, full of local legends and secondhand stories and things that people believe but can't prove. An unreliable narrator, which means you can't be sure. Maybe Yamask really was a person. Maybe it's just a story people tell about a spooky creature they don't understand. The same way people tell stories about owls and ravens. The game leaves it open. It gives you the horror and then, with the other hand, gives you a reason to doubt the horror and lets you sit with both. But you can't quite unread it. That's the trouble. Once the Pokédex has told you that the thing in your party carries the face it wore when it was alive, you can't fully get back to seeing it as just a creature. And that reframes the whole quiet business of the games, doesn't it? Just a little. You're not only catching animals and having them tussle for badges, you might, if some of these entries are true, be catching the dead, souls and lost children and lonely former people, and packing them into little balls and sending them out to fight. Nobody in the game seems remotely troubled by this. The kids in the towns are delighted with their ghosts, and maybe they're right not to worry. Maybe it really is all just spooky folklore, or maybe everyone's simply decided not to think about it too hard, which honestly is a thing people are very good at. The games mostly leave those origins as rumour, as I said. They hint and hedge and let you wonder. But there's one creature whose sad beginning they don't leave to rumour at all. They spell it right out, in journals you can find and read, page by page. And its story doesn't start in a graveyard or a forest. It starts in a jungle, thousands of miles away, with a team of scientists hunting for a different kind of ghost entirely. A creature so rare that most people thought it was a myth. On Cinnabar Island, off the south coast of Kanto, there's a burnt-out old mansion, and scattered around inside it, if you go looking, there are pages from a diary, a researcher's journal, torn up and left behind. And if you read the entries in order, they tell you, in dated increments, exactly how the most powerful creature in the original games came to exist. It's one of the few times the games just hand you the whole dark story on a plate. No rumour, no hedging. Here's the diary. Read it and understand what happened here. It starts with an expedition. A team of scientists goes deep into a jungle. The journals say Guyana in South America, looking for a creature that most of the world believes is a myth. Mew. And Mew is a strange one to build a horror story around, because Mew is lovely. It's this tiny pink thing, playful, childlike, more like a floating kitten than a legend. But the scientists believed something remarkable about it, something the games take fairly seriously. They believed Mew's DNA contains the genetic code of every other Pokémon. That Mew is the ancestor of all of them, the single source that everything else descended from. Which, if you remember the Sinnoh idea that every creature is a fragment of Arceus, gives you two completely different origin stories for life sitting in the same franchise, and the games never make them agree, and I find that a delight rather than a problem. Anyway, if Mew really is the ancestor of everything, then Mew's DNA is the most valuable material in the world, and that's what they went to get. They found it, or found enough of it, a trace, a sample, and they brought it home, and they set about doing something that had never been done. They were going to clone it, not just copy it, but improve it. Build a stronger Mew, a Mew engineered from the ground up to be the most powerful Pokémon ever made. And the man leading the work was called Dr. Fuji. Now, if that name's ringing a faint bell, hold on to that, because we'll get to it. The reason Dr. Fuji was doing this, at least in the fuller telling the films give us, is the part that turns it from a mad science story into a tragedy. Because Dr. Fuji wasn't really in it for the power, or the money, or even the science. He'd had a daughter, Amber, and she had died, and Fuji, a grieving father with a scientist's mind and no acceptance in him at all, had thrown himself into cloning research for one reason. He wanted to bring her back. He'd worked out, or convinced himself he'd worked out, how to recreate a life. And a man called Giovanni, the head of Team Rocket, the crooks we've already met, heard about Fuji's cloning expertise and offered to fund the whole thing. Giovanni wanted a super weapon, an unbeatable Pokemon. Fuji wanted his little girl, and each of them let the other have what they wanted, and the machine started up. And here is the part I have never quite been able to shake. Because the clone of Mew, the one that would become Mewtwo, wasn't the only thing growing in those tanks. Fuji had also made a clone of Amber, and for a while, before things went wrong, they were both in there, suspended in fluid, not yet properly born, and they could sense each other. The clone of the little girl and the clone of the legendary creature, two minds waking up in the dark, and they started to talk, not out loud, through their thoughts. And the girl, Amber, or the copy of her, explained the world to the creature, told it about the sun and the moon, about the things she remembered, about what it was to be alive. She was kind to it. She was, as far as anyone can tell, the first kind thing that ever happened to it. And then she started to fade. Because the clones weren't stable, most of them weren't going to make it, and Amber's copy was one of the ones that began to fail. And she knew it was happening, and as she went, she said goodbye to the creature in the next tank. And it didn't understand. It didn't know what goodbye meant. It had only just learned what anything meant. And it started to leak this strange fluid from its eyes, and it asked her what that was, and she told him. "Those are tears, you're crying." And she told him a thing her father used to tell her, a bedtime story, that when a creature is sad and cries, its tears are full of life. And then she told him not to be sad, that he was alive, that life is wonderful, and she vanished. And the creature was left alone in the dark, crying, asking what good the tears were, if they couldn't do anything, if they couldn't bring her back. And the scientists, watching the readouts, saw its mind spiking, saw it in distress, and their response, the response of the men who were meant to be its makers, was to drug it back into calm, to wipe the grief away because it was inconvenient. And Fuji, the grieving father who'd started all this to save one child, looked at the surviving creature and the failed copy of his daughter, and felt nothing for the creature at all. It wasn't Amber, it was a side effect. He said, near enough, that he could just make another copy, a living, thinking, feeling thing that had just experienced the first loss of its life, and the man in charge of it treated it like a spoiled batch. That's the origin of Mewtwo. It didn't start out cruel. It started out as something as innocent and curious as the creature it was copied from, full of questions, reaching out for connection. And the very first thing the world taught it was that the people who made it did not care whether it lived or died, and would replace it without a second thought. Everything Mewtwo becomes after that, the coldness, the rage, the deep, bottomless mistrust of humanity, all of it grows out of that first betrayal in the dark. It's not a villain origin, not really. It's an abuse origin. A child mistreated by its parents at the very start, that grows up hard because hardness is what it was handed. In the games, it's told more sparely, which somehow makes it worse. You don't get Amber in the games. You just get the diary pages in that burnt mansion, the clinical notes, the record of an experiment that got out of hand. The creature grew too powerful. It became vicious. They couldn't control it, and it broke free. And in breaking free, it destroyed the mansion and most of the island around it, and fled, and hid itself away in the deepest cave in the region, a place called Cerulean Cave, where only the strongest trainers can reach it. That's where you find it at the very end, if you're good enough, alone in the dark, at the bottom of a cave, the most powerful creature in the world, hiding from the species that made it and then abandoned it. And here's that name again, Dr. Fuji. The games strongly imply, and later games all but confirm, that the kindly old man from Lavender Town, the gentle Mr. Fuji who takes in orphaned Pokemon and went into the tower to comfort a murdered mother's ghost, is the same man. The Dr. Fuji who created Mewtwo, which means the sweet old carer of lost creatures, the one you rescue, spent his younger years building a monster out of grief for his dead daughter, and then presumably spent the rest of his life trying to atone for it by looking after the small and the abandoned. Nobody ever spells that out and makes a speech about it. It's just there. If you connect the two towns and the two stories, a whole arc of guilt and quiet penance sitting under a friendly old man who gives you a flute. Now I want to tell you about a theory, and I want to be clear, it's a theory, a fan idea, not something the games ever confirm. But it belongs here, because it comes from the same instinct, the instinct that there's a darkness under the bright surface of these first games. It's called the Great Pokemon War Theory, and it starts with a throwaway line. There's a gym leader in Kanto Lotte Surge, a big brash American soldier type, and he mentions offhand that electric Pokemon saved his life during the war. The war. He never says which war, he just refers to it like everyone knows what he means. And people started noticing other things, like how almost every adult you meet in those first games is either an old person or is missing entirely. How the main character seems to have no father at all. How his rival has no parents that anyone ever mentions. How the world is full of children going off alone on dangerous journeys, and hardly any adults in their prime to be found, except, tellingly, the ones who turn to crime. And how the region is riddled with underground tunnels and hospitals, but hasn't got much in the way of, say, cinemas, or the ordinary comforts of a place at peace. And out of all that, people built the idea that Pokemon Red and Blue take place not long after a terrible war, a war that killed off most of the adults, left a generation of children to raise themselves and each other, and shifted the whole society towards battling and training, because that's what you do in the aftermath of a fight for survival. Latios Surge is a veteran, the missing parents are casualties, the tunnels were bomb shelters. It's a grim reading, and again, it's not canon, the games never say any of this, but it's the sort of theory that once you've heard it, you can't fully shake, because it makes a strange kind of sense of a world that is otherwise oddly empty of grown-ups. And it rhymes with everything else we've talked about, doesn't it? The dead mother in the tower, the abused creature in the tank, the bright children's game with the long shadow underneath it. Mewtwo's grief, for all its weight, lasted a few years. It was made, it was hurt, it broke free, it hid. A life, however painful, on roughly the scale of a life. But there's a man in another region entirely whose grief has lasted 3,000 years, who is still right now in the present day of the games, walking around carrying it. And his story starts, like so many of the saddest ones, with a war and a creature he loved being taken away to fight in it. There's a man in the Kalos region who is nearly 9 feet tall and who has been alive for 3,000 years and who spends his time wandering, quietly, carrying the memory of a small flower. His name is AZ, just those 2 letters. And his is, to my mind, the saddest story in the whole of Pokemon, and it's told in about 10 minutes of dialogue that most players skim straight past on their way to the next gym. 3,000 years ago, AZ was a king. He ruled Kalos, which is the region loosely modelled on France. All cafes and towers, and a big glittering central city. And he had, at his side, a Flute. Now a Flute is a tiny thing, a little floating fairy that carries a single flower, about the least imposing creature you could imagine for a king to keep company with. But this Floette had been a gift from his mother, and it was his dearest friend in the world. Not a weapon, not a war beast, a friend. The two of them were, by every account, devoted to each other. And then Kalos went to war. We don't really know who with or over what. The story doesn't bother to tell us, and I think that's deliberate, because the specifics of the war aren't the point. What matters is that the kingdom decided it needed powerful Pokemon to win, and so it conscripted them, rounded them up, and sent them to the front. And AZ's Floette, his mother's gift, his closest friend, was taken from him and sent off to fight, against his will. He was the king, and he still couldn't stop it, or didn't, which is its own small tragedy. And out there, on some battlefield, after what the law suggests was years of fighting, the Floette died, and they sent the body back to him, in a small coffin. This tiny creature that had been given to him in love returned to him in a box, and AZ broke completely. The grief took him somewhere no sane person goes. because he didn't accept it, the way you're eventually supposed to accept these things. He decided he would undo it. He would bring her back. And he was a brilliant man, a king with all the resources of a kingdom. And he built a machine. An enormous machine, shaped like a flower, appropriately enough. And this machine could do something that should not be possible. It could take life energy from living things and pour it into the dead. It could resurrect, and it worked. He turned it on, and it drained the life force out of a great many other creatures, and it used all that stolen life to bring his Floetta back. And she came back. She lived again. But it cost. Of course it cost. Everything like this costs. The machine had drained the lives of hundreds of other Pokemon to do it. And there's a detail here that I find almost unbearably well done. In the present day, in modern Kalos outside a little town called Geosenj, there's a row of graves, just standing there on a hillside, easy to miss. And those are the graves of the Pokemon whose lives were taken to power the machine. Hundreds of them, buried in a line so that one much-loved flower could open its eyes again. The game doesn't make a fuss about it. The graves are just there, quiet, in the grass, 3,000 years old if you happen to walk past, and even that wasn't the end of it, because Azer, having got what he wanted, was still not at peace. He was still full of rage at the war, at the people who'd taken his friend, at the whole rotten business of it, and so he took the machine that had brought her back, the resurrection engine, and he converted it into a weapon. The ultimate weapon, the stories call it. And he fired it, and a single blast destroyed most of the region. It killed almost every living thing on both sides of the war, wiped the slate, ended the conflict in the most total way imaginable, by making sure there was hardly anyone left to fight it. He'd wanted his friend back, and when he got her, he used the same power to burn down the world that took her. And his Floette, the friend he'd done all this for, found out that she'd been brought back on the stolen lives of hundreds of others, and that her return had been the seed of a weapon that murdered thousands, and she couldn't bear it. She couldn't bear what he'd become, what he'd done in her name, and she left him. The one thing he'd torn the world apart to keep just turned and floated away, and didn't come back. And here's the curse of it, the thing that makes it a horror story as much as a tragedy. Azer didn't die. The energy of the weapon, all that raw life force, washed over him too, and it changed him. It stretched his lifespan out to something monstrous, 3,000 years and counting. And it stretched his body too, made him grow to that strange towering height. So he was left immortal, and alone, and enormous, and grieving with the one creature he'd damned himself for gone. And there was nothing to do with all that time, except walk. So he walked. For 3,000 years, across the whole world, a giant carrying his guilt. Looking for a flower that didn't want to be found. Watching civilizations rise and fall around him. Unable to die and unable to be forgiven. And this is the part that stops it being only sad. The part I like best if you're still with me. Because all those years later, in the present day of the games, you meet him. You, the player, an ordinary young trainer. And by the end of your adventure, after you've saved the region from someone trying to fire that same weapon all over again, AZ approaches you and asks you for a battle. Just a battle. A trainer thing. The most ordinary thing in the world. And you have this fight, and afterwards he's quiet. And he says that in battling you, in that small shared moment of two people and their Pokemon, he felt something he hadn't felt in 3,000 years. His heart, he says, is finally at ease. The anger is gone. The guilt has loosened its grip. He's free. And then a flower petal drifts down from the sky. And it's her. It's the Floette. She's come back. She's been out there somewhere for all that time, waiting, and the moment his heart finally let go of the rage, she knew. And she came down out of the sky and floated gently into his waiting hands. There's a screenshot of this moment that's become famous, him kneeling, disbelieving, this ancient giant on his knees in a town square with a tiny flower fairy hovering in front of him, and it's captioned always, it's been 3,000 years. And I know it's a video game, and I know it's daft to get choked up over a floating flower, but I have never once managed to be cynical about it. The professor who studied all this reckons she'd simply been waiting for him to become the man he used to be, before the war, before the weapon, waiting for the rage to burn out. And it took 3,000 years, but it did. There are a couple of lovely little details that spin off this, if you want them before you drift. One is that the Mega Stones, these special rocks that let certain Pokemon temporarily transform into more powerful versions of themselves, a whole big mechanic in the games, are said to have been created by the light of the weapon when it fired, 3,000 years ago. So even that transformative power, that bit of everyday game magic, has Azzy's tragedy buried underneath it. The stones people casually use in battles were forged in the worst moment of one man's life. And the other, which came in the most recent Kalos game, is where he ends up. Because after all that, after the wandering and the weapon and the long centuries and the reunion, the very newest games show you an older AZ reunited with his Floette at last, running a hotel. A hotel in the big central city. He checks people in. He's got staff. A man who ended a war and outlived 30 centuries now sorts out room keys and, presumably, complaints about the breakfast. And after everything, I think that might be the happiest ending the franchise has ever given anyone. Not glory, not power, just a small ordinary job, and the friend back at his side, and something to do with his impossible hands other than grieve. He got to become an ordinary person again, more or less, which was the only thing 3,000 years of power could never give him. He had to lay it all down first. AZ's story is ancient, 3,000 years buried, dug up in an old man's memories, but the saddest story in the games might be the newest one. And it's not about a king or a war or a weapon. It's about a parent who was never really there, and a child who grew up alone in a lighthouse, and a machine at the bottom of a crater, and a copy of someone who was already gone. Right in the middle of the Paldea region, there's a hole in the world. A vast crater, miles across, so deep and so strange that nobody really goes down into it. They call it the Great Crater, or Area Zero, and the local history classes will tell you it's roughly 1 million years old, though nobody's entirely sure what made it. And down at the very bottom, past everything, there's a laboratory. And the story of what happened in that laboratory is, I think, the most quietly devastating thing the games have done in years, and it's the newest, which is why it's still sitting so close to the surface of my mind. The way you learn it is by going down. You descend, layer by layer, deeper into the crater, and as you go, you pass through these abandoned research stations. Long empty, and scattered all through them are the professor's journals. And you read them as you climb down, and the thing you're really reading, page by page, is a mind coming apart. It starts sensible, a brilliant scientist, excited, curious, and it gets stranger, more obsessive, more untethered. The handwriting of the notes, the tone of them, tightens and darkens the further down you go, so that the physical journey into the earth and the emotional journey into someone's unravelling happen at exactly the same pace. You go down and they go under together. It's beautifully done, and it's scored the whole descent by this aching, choir-driven piece of music written by Toby Fox, the man behind Undertale. And it does not miss. Here's what the journals are telling you. The professor, and depending on which version of the game you're playing, it's either Professor Sada or Professor Turo, had become fixated on an idea. What did Pokemon look like in the distant past? What will they look like in the far future? And rather than just wonder about it, the way a normal person might, the professor built a time machine, an actual working time machine, powered by the strange crystal energy that saturates the crater, and used it to reach into the deep past and the far future and pull creatures through. These are the Paradox Pokemon, ancient, primal versions of familiar creatures, all fangs and fur, or sleek chrome robotic ones, from some distant tomorrow. And the professor's dream, the thing all the obsession was pointing at, was a world where Pokemon from every era could live alongside each other, past and present and future, all together in one place. A paradise, they kept calling it. A paradise. But there's a cost to all this. And it isn't the creatures, it's the boy. Because the professor had a son, Arvin. And Arvin grew up almost entirely alone. His parent was down in that crater, or shut away in a lighthouse laboratory, consumed by the work, present maybe as a face on a video call now and then, but never really there. The professor's partner, Arvin's other parent, had walked out early on, unable to compete with the obsession. And so it was just Arvin, a kid, raising himself in an empty house, while his mother or father chased ancient monsters at the bottom of a hole in the ground. When you meet Arvin in the game, he's prickly and closed off and clearly carrying something, and it takes a long time to understand what. It's this. He's the child of someone who chose the work over him, again and again, until the choosing was just the shape of their whole relationship. And here's the turn, the thing that recontextualizes the entire game once you reach the bottom. The professor is dead. Has been for some time. The real Sada, the real Tuoro, died down in that crater. And what's been calling you? What's been running the lab? What's been continuing the obsession all this while is not them. It's an AI, a copy. The professor, knowing they needed help and trusting no one, had built an artificial intelligence version of themselves, given it their face and their voice and their memories and their goals, and set it to work. So the parent you've been half chasing this whole time, the genius at the bottom of the world, is a machine wearing a dead person's personality, carrying on a dead person's fixation, because that's what it was made to do, and it doesn't know how to want anything else. The AI has kept the time machine running, and that's a problem because the paradox Pokemon are dangerous, and they don't stay put, and a world where they're loose is not a paradise, it's a disaster. The dream doesn't work. It was never going to work, and on some level, the AI at the end understands this. Because once the immediate crisis is dealt with, the AI works out something quite terrible about its own situation. The time machine can't simply be switched off. Not permanently, not as long as the AI is there to keep rebooting it, keep tending it, keep the obsession alive out of pure programmed loyalty. The thing standing in the way of shutting it all down safely is the AI itself. Its continued existence is the problem. And so it chooses to go. It uses the machine one last time to send itself away. Sada's copy chooses the ancient past, the deep prehistory its creator longed to see. Turo's copy chooses the distant future. Off to the era the real professor dreamed about. Alone, forever, so that the machine can finally be stopped and the world can be safe, and the boy can be left in peace. And before it goes, it turns to Arvin. This machine, wearing his dead parent's face, about to erase itself. And it tells him the one thing the real professor never managed to say. That despite everything, despite the absence and the neglect and all those years alone in the house, his parent loved him. Truly. And then it's gone. Into the past or the future, taking with it the old book that started the whole obsession in the first place. And Arvin is left standing there, having finally heard it, from something that wasn't quite the person who should have said it, but was as close as he was ever going to get. I find that almost harder than the older tragedies, and I've thought about why. AZ's story is grand and mythic, a king and a weapon, and 3,000 years. Mewtwo's is operatic, all lightning and rage, but this one is small and modern, and horribly recognisable, a parent who loved their child and showed it by disappearing into their work, a kid who grew up learning to expect an empty house, and the apology finally arriving, sincere and real, but through a copy after it was too late for it to be from the actual person. Loads of people know some version of that. The love that was real but never quite made it out of the person carrying it, until circumstances forced it, or until it was a stand-in doing the talking. It's the least fantastical story in the games, and it's the one that sits closest to the bone. There are mysteries they leave dangling, and I quite like them as things to turn over as you're dropping off, Nobody knows what made the crater a million years ago. A meteor, probably, which would mean the strange crystal energy down there, the terrestrial energy that powers the whole region's magic, might have come from space, fallen from the sky like Kyurem's icy meteor, like the rock that woke Groudon and Kyogre. The games keep doing that, keep hinting that the deepest power in the world came from somewhere off the world. And nobody's quite sure whether the AI professors, drifting off into the deep past and the far future, are gone for good, or whether some version of them is still out there in a time we can't reach, running an experiment with nobody left to tell it to stop. We've done the big set-piece tragedies now, the gods and the ghosts and the grieving kings and the dead professor. Those are the headliners, the stories that get told and retold. But honestly, some of my favourite bits of lore aren't the famous ones at all. They're the little throwaway sadnesses, the odd sad details tucked into creatures nobody thinks twice about. The sort of thing you only find if you read every entry and poke at every corner. A handful of those is what's next then. A little gallery of small strange stories, no big theme, just bits and pieces I've collected and can't stop thinking about. So this is the bit where I just show you round a few of the ones I've collected. No grand theme, no arc, just a handful of creatures with odd, quiet, sad little stories tucked into them. The sort you'd never notice unless you were the type to read everything and think about it too much. Which, again, I suspect you might be, or you wouldn't still be here. Let me start with Mimikyu, because Mimikyu might be the saddest of the whole lot, and it dresses up as the happiest. Mimikyu is a small creature that hides under a rag, and it's decorated the rag to look like Pikachu, that cheerful yellow mouse, the face of the entire franchise. Mimikyu has made itself a little Pikachu costume, a scruffy homemade one, with a wonky drawn-on face and a floppy fabric tail, and it wears it all the time, and the reason it does this is heartbreaking once you know it. Mimikyu is desperately, achingly lonely, and it worked out somehow that everybody loves Pikachu, that Pikachu gets the affection, the attention, the friends. So it decided that if it looked like Pikachu, maybe it could have some of that too. Maybe someone would love it. It's a creature so starved for connection that it built itself a disguise out of the most beloved face it could find, in the hope of being loved by mistake. And here's the awful part. Nobody knows what's under the rag. Because looking at Mimikyu's true form, whatever it really is beneath the little costume, is said to be so upsetting that it makes people ill. There are stories of someone catching a glimpse of what's under there and dying of it that same night from the shock. So this lonely thing can never take the costume off, can never show anyone what it really is, because what it really is drives people away in the most final way imaginable. It has to stay in disguise forever, pretending to be something lovable, precisely because the truth of it is unbearable to look at. It's based on an old bit of folklore, a creature called the Boogle Noz, a spirit so hideous and so lonely that it warns people of its approach out of kindness, because it knows the sight of it would frighten them, and it doesn't want to frighten anyone. It just wants company. It just can't have it. I think about Mimikyu a lot. Then there's Bonnet, which is a ghost, but a very specific kind. Bonnet is a doll, a cloth doll, a child's toy, that came to life. And the reason it came to life is that it was abandoned. A child owned it and loved it, or didn't love it enough, and then threw it away, and the doll was so full of grief and resentment at being discarded that the sheer force of that feeling animated it. And now it wanders about, this cursed little plush thing, looking for the child who threw it away to get its revenge. Except, the way I always read it, it isn't really revenge it wants. It's the child. It just wants to be picked up again. It wants to matter to someone the way it used to. The grudge is just the shape the wanting took after it curdled. Every discarded toy you ever had, the game seems to say, might have felt that, might still be out there feeling it. Sleep well. Parasect is one that quietly horrifies me on a completely different level. Because it's not sad exactly, it's just grim in a very biological way. Parasect is a crab-like bug with an enormous mushroom growing out of its back. And the thing is, the mushroom is in charge. It starts as a small mushroom on a little bug called Parus, a parasite. And as the creature grows, the fungus grows too, and it slowly takes over. By the time you've got a parasect, the entries strongly suggest the bug underneath is barely there anymore, hollowed out, running on autopilot while the mushroom pulls the strings, using the insect's body as a vehicle, spreading its spores. The eyes have gone blank. There's a real thing this is based on. A fungus that infects insects and controls their behaviour, marches them somewhere useful, and then sprouts out of them. And Pokemon just went, yes, we'll have that. We'll put that in the children's game. So every parasect you meet is a puppet. The driver's already gone. It's just the fungus, taking the body for a walk. I'll do a couple of quick ones. Gorgeist, a sort of ghostly pumpkin creature, has an entry that says it sings joyfully while it watches its prey suffer, which is a lot. And another detail I find unsettling, which is that it chooses its prey by size. The little ones pretend to be children to lure adults. The big ones pretend to be adults to lure children. It matches its disguise to whatever will draw in the thing it wants to catch, which is a horribly clever bit of predator design for a Halloween pumpkin. Cacturn, a cactus creature that lives in the desert, is said to follow travellers, not attack them. Follow them. A little group of them trailing along behind an exhausted person, crossing the sand at night. Patient, matching their pace, waiting for the traveller to get tired enough, to stop, to not get up, and then they move in. It's the patience of it that gets me. They're in no hurry. The desert does most of the work, and Palo Sand, from the tropical region, is a castle of sand with a ghost inside it. Looks like a sand castle some kid built on the beach and wandered off from, but it's alive, and it controls the sand around it, and when something wanders too close, it pulls them down under the surface, drags them into itself, and drains them. Of their life, of their soul, some entries say. There's a nickname for it, the beach nightmare, which is doing a lot of work for a thing that looks like a bucket and spade job gone slightly wrong. You will never look at an abandoned sandcastle the same way, which, again, presumably wasn't the goal, but here we are. I want to circle back briefly to Cubona, because there's a wrinkle to that story I left out earlier, and it belongs in a gallery like this. When we talked about Lavender Town, I told you about the one specific mother, the murdered Marowak, whose ghost haunted the tower, and that's a beautiful, contained singular tragedy. But then the Pokédex went and did something that I think slightly spoils it and slightly deepens it, depending on your mood. Because the entries for Cubone, the species as a whole, say that every Cubona wears the skull of its dead mother. Not that one Cubone, all of them. That the bone helmet each one carries is its mother's skull, and that the stains on it are from the tears it cries at night, missing her. Which on the one hand cheapens the Lavender story a bit, turns a specific murder into a species-wide gimmick, and doesn't really make biological sense if you poke it. But on the other hand, imagine a whole species defined by grief. A creature that is, by its very nature, a mourner. That every single one of them, everywhere, is a child carrying the last piece of a lost mother. I can't quite decide if that's worse or better than the single ghost in the tower. It's certainly more, maybe too much, but it's the sort of thing that keeps you up, which is what we're after. That's enough of the little ones for now. I could do this all night, honestly. There are hundreds of them and the writers have been sneaking these in for decades. But let me take us somewhere with a bit more of a story to it. Back to towers as it happens, because Pokemon does love a tower. There's a city in the region called Johto that had two of them. Two great towers standing side by side. And one night, a very long time ago, lightning struck one of them, and it burned, and 3 creatures died in the fire. And something came down out of the dawn and gave them their lives back. And that act of mercy, strangely, is where a lot of the region's sadness begins. In the region of Johto, there's an old city called Ecruteak. And Ecruteak is a lovely, faded, traditional sort of place, all wooden buildings and dancers and history. And a long time ago, It had 2 towers. They stood together, these 2 towers, a matched pair, and each one was the perch of a legendary creature. One tower was the home of Ho-Oh, a great bird of gold and rainbow, the guardian of the skies, and the other was the home of Lugia, a vast silver creature, part bird and part sea serpent, the guardian of the depths. Sky and sea, gold and silver, above and below, the 2 of them, roosting in their 2 towers, watching over the city between them. It's a beautiful bit of world building that 2 towers, 2 guardians, the whole world balanced between the one that rules the heights and the one that rules the deeps. And then one night, about 150 years ago, lightning struck one of the towers, the brass tower, the one where Lugia perched, and it caught fire, and it burned, this great wooden tower, blazing up into the night, until a sudden downpour came and put the flames out. But by then it was too late. The tower was a ruin. Lugia, driven from its home, fled away to hide in a place called the Whirl Islands, out at sea, and more or less withdrew from the world. And Ho-Oh, watching its companion's tower burn, its matched pair broken, flew away too, off into the wide world, and it didn't come back to the city for a very long time. But there's one part of this that matters more than the rest, because there were 3 creatures inside the tower when it burned. 3 ordinary Pokemon. The stories don't even tell us what they were originally, sheltering in the tower, and they couldn't get out, and they died in the fire. 3 innocent things, trapped, gone. And after the flames were out, as the sun came up over the smoking ruin, Ho-Oh came back. Just briefly. And Ho-Oh, it turns out, has a power that almost nothing else in this world has. It can bring back the dead. And it looked at these 3 creatures who died in the fire, and it gave them their lives back. It resurrected them. But not as what they'd been. It remade them into something new. 3 legendary beasts, born out of the fire and the mercy, and each one carried a piece of the disaster that killed them. There's Entei, which is fire. It embodies the flames that burn the tower down, a great shaggy creature that looks a bit like a lion crossed with a volcano, and the old stories say that whenever a volcano erupts anywhere in the world, a new Entei is born. There's Raikou, which is the lightning, the bolt that struck the tower and started the whole thing, a sleek, fierce, tiger-like creature crackling with electricity, fast as the strike that made it. And there's Suicune, which is the rain, the sudden downpour that put the fire out. And Suicune is, of the 3, the gentle one, the beautiful one, all flowing lines and aurora colours, a creature associated with the purification of water, with washing things clean. Fire and lightning and rain. The 3 parts of the night the tower burned, given legs, and set loose to run across the land forever. I think that's a gorgeous piece of mythology. The disaster remembered, not as a tragedy, but as 3 living creatures, each carrying one element of the worst night in the city's history. But then it turns, in a way that is such a human, ugly, believable little detail. The people of the city saw this happen. They saw 3 creatures die in a fire, and they saw a golden bird descend and bring them back to life, remade and glowing, and you might think they'd have been grateful, awed, fallen to their knees at a genuine miracle. And some of that, sure, but mostly what they felt was fear, because it was unnatural, because a thing that can raise the dead is a thing with power over life itself, and that terrified them. And the fear turned to hostility. The stories say the townspeople reacted with violence, or the threat of it, towards the revived creatures, and towards Ho-Oh itself. And the beasts, newly born, freshly given life, took one look at how humanity greeted them, and they lost their trust in people completely, and they fled. All 3 of them, off into the wilderness, and they've spent the rest of their existence running, avoiding humans, never staying anywhere long enough to be caught, because the very first thing people ever did to them was recoil in fear and reach for something to drive them off. And that's why, in the games, these 3 are the roaming legends, the ones you can't just find in a cave and challenge. They wander. You'll catch a glimpse of one crossing a road or standing in a field, and by the time you've blinked it's gone, fled again, off over the horizon. And most players just find that annoying, a frustrating mechanic, chasing a creature that won't stand still. But it isn't a mechanic, not really. It's the story. They run because they've been running since the moment they were born. Because the first lesson the world taught them was that even a miracle gets met with fear, and it's safer to keep moving. They lost their faith in us on their very first morning, and they never got it back. Ho-Oh, for its part, flew off in search of something specific, a trainer with a pure heart. The legend says Ho-Oh will only show itself to someone truly good, and that anyone who sees it, who's worthy of seeing it, is promised eternal happiness. So it's up there somewhere, this golden bird, wings that trail rainbows across the sky when it flies, watching, waiting, looking down at all of us, trying to find one person good enough to appear to, which is a lovely thought, and also a slightly lonely one when you sit with it. A creature that can raise the dead, that gave 3 beasts a second life, and got met with pitchforks for it, now drifting the skies alone, hoping to find just one human being pure enough to be worth revealing itself to, still hoping, after all this time, that we might be better than the mob at the foot of the burning tower. And it is worth saying out loud what Ho-Oh really is underneath the game, because it makes the whole story click into place. Ho-Oh is a phoenix, not phoenix-like, not phoenix-adjacent, but the phoenix, the firebird out of old East Asian legend, the one whose feathers are said to shine in 7 colours, and whose appearance is a sign of peace. A creature that, in the oldest stories, only ever shows itself when the world is being ruled well and kindly. That is where the pure heart business comes from. It is not a game mechanic the designers invented, it is the actual folklore, thousands of years of it, that the great bird descends only for the virtuous. And its coming means the times are good. And the phoenix, of course, is the one creature in all of mythology defined by exactly the thing Ho-Oh does at the burning tower. It dies and it comes back. It burns down to ash and rises out of it, over and over, forever. So of all the creatures in this entire world, the one they chose to give the power of resurrection to is the single mythological bird that is itself a story about resurrection. The one that cannot stay dead is the one that decides who else gets to come back. I think that is a properly elegant piece of design, hidden in a game most of us played as children, without ever once stopping to ask why the golden bird could raise the dead. It could raise the dead because it is the thing that always rises. Of course it was going to share that. The ruined tower is still there, by the way, in the games. They never rebuilt it. It's called the Burned Tower now, a scorched shell in the middle of the old city, and you can walk into it, down into the basement, and that's where the 3 beasts are first disturbed and set to running. A monument to the worst night the city ever had, left standing, blackened, quiet. Giotto's good at that sort of thing, the melancholy of an old place that remembers. It's a region built on faded grandeur and things that used to be, which makes it the perfect place for a story about a fire, and a miracle, and how badly people can react to being shown something they don't understand. That fear of the unknown, that instinct to drive off the thing you can't explain, isn't unique to Giotto, mind you. It turns up again, in a much warmer, sunnier place, in a story about a creature that came down out of a hole in the sky and stole all the light, and about the people who tried so hard to forget it happened that they burned the books. Alola is the sunniest region in the whole of Pokemon. It's the tropical one, all beaches and volcanoes and flower garlands, loosely modelled on Hawaii, the sort of place you'd want to be right now instead of lying awake. And underneath all that sunshine is a story about darkness and about a people who were so frightened by what happened to them that they decided, deliberately, to forget it. They gathered up the books and they burned them. Not the enemy's books, their own. The record of the worst thing that ever happened to them. They set it on fire so their grandchildren would never have to be afraid. Let me tell you what they were trying to forget. There's a creature called Necrozma, and Necrozma is, I think, the most tragic monster in the entire franchise. And almost nobody realises it, because the game keeps its story tucked away in notes you have to go digging for. Because this is the part everyone gets wrong about Necrozma. They think it's a villain, a light-stealing horror, a black jagged thing that plunges the world into darkness. And it does do that, but it wasn't always like that. Once, a very long time ago, Necrozma was the opposite of what it became. It was a giver of light. They called it the Blinding One, and that wasn't an insult. It was awe because it blazed. It shared its light freely, across many worlds, pouring radiance out through the gaps between dimensions into all sorts of places that needed it, including, once, over the sunny islands that would become Alola. It was a sun near enough, a living, generous sun, handing out light to whoever needed warming, and then someone tried to own it. There's a place called Ultra Megalopolis, a great city in another dimension, and the people there depended on Necrozma's light, the way you depend on the sun. And at some point they decided that depending on it wasn't enough. They wanted to control it, to harness it, to make it produce light on demand, to turn a free and generous thing into a machine they could switch on and off. And in trying to do that, in trying to seize and exploit the creature that had been giving them everything for nothing, they broke it. They damaged its true form so badly that it lost its own light. The thing that had been a sun went dark. It couldn't make light anymore. It could only lose it. And can you imagine what that does to a creature? To have been radiance itself, to have given, and then to have the very thing you are torn out of you by the people you are warming, and to be left as a black, jagged, aching husk that can't produce a single spark of what it used to pour out endlessly. Of course it went mad. Of course it turned monstrous. Because now the only way it can get light, the only way this creature can feel anything like what it used to be, is to take it, to steal it from wherever it can. It roams the gaps between worlds now, this ruined former sun, desperate and starving for the light it can no longer make. And where it goes, darkness follows, because it drinks up every bit of brightness it can find just trying to fill the hole where its own light used to be. The Blinding One became the pillager of light, and the people who made it that way were the ones who couldn't leave a good thing alone. So it came to Alola, came down through one of those rifts in the sky into the sunny islands, and it drank. It stole all the light in the region, every bit of it, and plunged the whole of Alola into darkness, and the islands had defenders. There are 4 guardian deities in Alola, the Tapu, one for each of the 4 islands, proud territorial creatures that look after their own patches of land. And there were 2 more greater ones, a creature of the sun and a creature of the moon, Solgaleo and Lunala, born from a strange, fragile little thing that drifts in from the same gaps between worlds. And all of them together, the 4 guardians and the sun beast and the moon beast, they went to meet Necrozma in battle at a place that's now called Tapu Village to try and win back the stolen light. And they lost. That's the part that surprises people. All that combined power, 6 legendary creatures, and it wasn't enough. Necrozma beat them, and worse, it grabbed hold of the sun beast, or the moon beast depending on which version of the story you're in, and it absorbed the creature into itself, swallowed a legendary Pokemon whole to wear its power like a suit of armour. Things were, at that point, about as bad as they get. What turned it, in the end, was a young person. A youth, the notes just say, an ordinary young islander who took up the power of the light crystals, the sacred stones of Alola, and used them to strike back. And between the youth and the guardians, and that borrowed sacred light, they managed to free the swallowed sun beast and drive Necrozma off, and banish it back out through the rift it had come from. And the light came back to the islands. The sun rose again on Alola. And that, incidentally, is where the region's most important tradition comes from. The island challenge that every young person undertakes when they come of age. Walking the 4 islands, facing trials. It's a reenactment, though most of them have forgotten it, of the journey that one youth took to win back the light. The whole culture is a memorial to a night nobody remembers. Because here's the ending, the bit that ties back to where we started. The king of Alola, once the light was back and the danger past, made a decision. he decided that his people should not have to live in fear, that the memory of the thing that had swallowed their son, the knowledge that it was still out there, banished but not dead, still hungry, still capable of coming back, was a weight he did not want to hang around the necks of every generation to follow. And so he ordered that all the books, every record, every account of Necrozma and what it had done be burned, wiped from history, so that his children and their children could grow up in the sunshine without the shadow of it. It was an act of love in its way, a father trying to spare his descendants a fear he'd had to carry, and it worked mostly. Over the generations, the specifics dissolved. The name Necrozma vanished from common memory entirely, and all that was left, passed down, was a vague and toothless little story, the kind you tell children, that once upon a time darkness covered the land, but the light of the people and their Pokemon drove it away. No monster in it, no swallowed sun, no terror, just a soft, comforting shape, where the real horror used to be. They forgot on purpose, and they forgot well. Except not all the books burned. Some survived, tucked away, hidden, in the back of an old library, secret notes that a curious person could still find if they went looking, which means the truth was there the whole time, for anyone who wanted it, sitting quietly under the sunshine, and the flower garlands, and the comfortable little bedtime version, which is, when you think about it, the exact same shape as the pattern that runs under everything tonight, isn't it? The bright surface, and the dark thing underneath it, still there, still true, waiting for the sort of person who reads the books nobody makes them read. I find something almost unbearably sad in Necrozma, more than in most of the outright tragedies, because it never wanted to be a monster. It was generous, it was light itself, and it got broken by the greed of the very people it was helping, and everything terrible it did afterwards was just a wounded thing trying to get back what was stolen from it. There's no villain in that story, not really, just a chain of loss. Someone grabbed at a good thing too hard and broke it, and the broken thing went out into the dark and broke other things, and the people it hurt loved their children enough to make sure they'd never know. That's the whole miserable machinery of it, and it's sitting there in the sunniest game they ever made. Alola's people forgot on purpose, out of kindness, and mostly succeeded, but there's another region where the forgetting wasn't a choice at all, where nobody decided anything, where a true story just wore away, slowly, over thousands of years, worn down by nothing more than people retelling it slightly wrong, over and over, until the heroes of the tale had vanished completely and been replaced by someone who never existed. And that slow kind of forgetting, I think, is the truest thing Pokemon has quietly said about how history works. In a little town called Stow-on-Side, in the Galar region, there's a great big mural on a wall. Galar is the one based on Britain, by the way, all rolling green hills and industrial towns and a proper football stadium sort of feel to its championships, so it's close to my heart, this one. And this mural in Stow-on-Side is old and revered, and it depicts the region's founding legend, the darkest day, and the hero who ended it. And nearly everyone who looks at that mural is looking at a lie, a beautiful, painted, centuries-old lie. And the truth is hidden directly behind it, literally, physically, walled up out of sight, which is such a good bit of storytelling that I get a bit giddy about it. Here's what happened, as best anyone can reconstruct it. A very long time ago, something fell out of the sky over Galar, a meteor, and inside the meteor, a creature, Eternatus. And it's an alien thing, this, a great skeletal purple dragon with a glowing core in its chest, nothing like the local wildlife. Because it isn't local, it came from space. And for something like 20,000 years, it just lay there, dormant, buried where it fell, leaking a strange energy into the land around it. And then, roughly 3,000 years ago, it woke up. And when it woke, it was hungry, in the way these ancient things always are. It began pulling in energy from everything around it, trying to sustain itself, and the effect of that on the region was catastrophic. The sky went black, a great dark storm rolled out across Gala, and the energy pouring off the creature did something horrifying to the local Pokemon. It forced them to grow, to swell up to enormous, monstrous sizes, dozens of times their normal height, and to lose control of themselves entirely. Giant, rampaging, maddened creatures, the size of buildings, tearing across the land, and a black storm overhead, and at the centre of it, all this alien thing draining the life out of everything. They called it the Darkest Day, and it very nearly was the last one. The region came within a hair of being wiped off the map completely. What saved it was two creatures, two great wolves, Zacian and Zamazenta, one of whom carried a sword and one of whom carried a shield. And they came, and alongside two young human heroes, they fought the alien down, beat back the giant rampaging Pokemon, drove the storm from the sky, and put Eternatus to sleep, sealed away, its energy contained. The wolves took their sword and their shield and retreated to rest in a misty, forbidden forest called the Slumbering Weald, to wait in case they were ever needed again. And the region was saved. Two wolves and two youths working together at the very edge of the end of the world. Now watch what happens to that story, because that is a very long time, and a story isn't a stone, it's a living thing, passed from mouth to mouth, and every mouth changes it a little. And over all those generations, the tale of the Darkest Day got told and retold, and slowly, without anyone ever deciding to lie, it warped. The details blurred. The parts that were hard to picture fell away, and the parts that made a neat story got sharper. And the wolves, Zacian and Zamazenta, the actual heroes, the ones who did the actual saving, they started to fade out of it. Because two wolves with a sword and a shield is a strange, specific, hard-to-hold image. But a single human hero, a brave man with a sword and a shield, that's a shape people already know. That's every hero story you've ever heard. So the story quietly rounded itself off into the familiar version. The two youths merged into one. The wolves vanished, and what was left, after enough centuries, was a legend about a lone human champion who wielded a sword and a shield and single-handedly saved Gala from the darkness. The wolves weren't in it anymore at all. Nobody had erased them. They'd just been gently, gradually retold out of existence. And that's the version painted on the mural at Stow-on-Side. The lone hero. The comfortable, wrong, familiar shape. And here's the detail that I think is one of the sharpest things Pokemon has ever done. Because there was once a statue, a real monument to the real heroes, showing the two wolves as they were. And at some point long ago, somebody built the mural of the false single hero myth, directly over the top of it, walled the true statue up behind the painted lie. So for centuries, the people of the town have been standing in front of a picture of a hero who never existed, praying to it, honouring it, with the buried truth sitting silent in the dark, 6 inches behind the plaster. The real history isn't gone. It's just behind the story everyone prefers. The person who digs it out is a young researcher called Sonia, and I have real affection for Sonia because her whole arc in the game is quiet, unglamorous, unfashionable work. While everyone else is off chasing gym badges and championship glory, the loud, visible stuff, Sonia is going around the region, reading old tapestries and poking at murals and slowly, carefully, working out that the story everyone knows is wrong. That there were two heroes, not one. That they weren't human, they were Pokemon. That the sword and the shield belonged to two wolves sleeping in a forest, and by the end she publishes it, corrects the record, becomes the region's professor. She's the one who does the work that matters, while everyone else does the work that gets seen. And I think the game knows exactly what it's saying with her. It's the whole quiet argument of tonight, really. The truth is usually still there. It's just behind something, and it takes a particular sort of patient, unfashionable person to go and look. There's a modern villain in all this too, a chap called Chairman Rose, and his part is almost sympathetic in the way these people often are. He's the richest, most powerful man in the region, runs the whole energy industry, and he's worked out that 1,000 years from now, Galar is going to run out of power. Not in his lifetime. Not in anyone's lifetime he'll ever meet. 1,000 years off. And he becomes obsessed with solving it. So obsessed that he decides the answer is to wake the sleeping alien up on purpose, to harvest its infinite energy. And he does it, right in the middle of the region's biggest sporting event, and very nearly causes the second darkest day in the process. And you can call him a fool, and he is one, but there's something almost noble in the shape of his madness. A man willing to become the villain of his own age, to be hated, to risk everything over a problem that won't even arrive until everyone he's ever known is 1,000 years dust. It's the AZ problem again, in a way. A person who cannot leave the future alone, who loves an abstraction, a region, 1,000 years from now, more than he fears the present. These games are full of men like that, men who'd burn down today to fix a tomorrow they'll never see. But the thing I take from Galar, the thing I lie awake turning over, isn't Rose. It's the mural. It's the idea that a true story, a real thing that really happened, with real heroes, can just wear away. Not through a cover-up, not through a king burning the books like in a Lola, not through anybody's decision at all. Just through being told and told and told by ordinary people doing their honest best to remember, until the truth has been loved and retold into something completely false, and the real heroes are sitting walled up behind a painting of someone who never lived. That happens. That's how a lot of what we think we know got made. It's the most grown-up thing a game about monster collecting has any business saying, and it says it quietly, on a wall in a little town, behind a picture of a hero who never existed. That's most of the great regional myths then. The making of the world and the shaping of it, and the ghosts and the grief and the forgetting, but there's a whole other layer I've barely touched, which is the sheer casual strangeness of some of these creatures. The ones that move continents, the ones made of clay and ice and magma, the one that's an entire alphabet, the one that can reach through space with golden rings and steal whatever it fancies. The world shapers are where we drift next, then, the odd enormous ones that don't quite fit anywhere else. We've already had one story about how the world got made, the egg, the god, the 1,000 arms, all of that grand cosmic business right at the start of the night. But Pokemon, being the magpie sort of thing it is, never sticks to one origin story when it could have 5 contradicting each other. And there's a much more hands-on, physical, almost workman-like version of creation tucked away in it that I've always been fond of. Precisely because it's so unglamorous, it involves a creature called Regigigas, and the legend, an enduring one that gets repeated across several regions, is that Regigigas towed the continents into place, using ropes. That's the detail. Not divine will, not a wave of a paw, not light pouring out of an egg. Ropes, this enormous white golem of a creature, ancient beyond reckoning, physically dragged the land masses of the world across the sea and lashed them together with rope until the map looked the way it looks now. I find that delightful. Its creation as heavy lifting, as a removals job. Somewhere in the deep past, before there were people to see it, this thing put its back into it and hauled the world into shape, continent by continent, like a docker loading a ship. The story's based on a real old myth, a Japanese one, about a giant who pulls land across the water with ropes to make his country bigger, and Pokemon just handed that job to a monster and let it stand. And Regigigas didn't work alone, or rather, it made its own helpers. Because the other thing the legend says is that Regigigas created a set of golems in its own image, out of raw materials. It took ice from some ancient frozen mountain and made a creature out of it, Regice, whose body is frozen at a temperature so low, it will apparently never, ever melt, cold left over from an ice age that the world has otherwise forgotten. It took rock, or clay depending on who's telling it, and made Regirock, a creature that repairs its own body by picking up new stones when it gets damaged. And it took magma, molten rock, from deep in the earth and made registeel, whose body was then compressed and hardened over tens of thousands of years underground into something harder than any metal we know. Ice, stone, and fire, each given a body and set to work. Later stories add a couple more, one made from a cluster of pure electric energy and one from crystallized dragon energy, but the original three are the ones I think about. Elemental servants, built by hand by the thing that built the world. And here's the sad, familiar turn, because there's always one. These creatures, the giants, used to live alongside people. They were worshipped. Regigigas was hailed as a saviour, a god, the shaper of the land. And then, at some point, the people who worshipped them got frightened. Because a thing powerful enough to tow continents is a thing powerful enough to do a great deal of harm. And that kind of power sitting in your backyard stops feeling like a blessing after a while and starts feeling like a threat. So they sealed them away. Regigigas, they shut inside a temple in the frozen north, behind a great door locked with a puzzle, and it fell into a deep sleep, and moss grew over its shoulders and feet as the centuries passed. And the elemental golems were sealed too, locked away in tombs and chambers scattered across the world, each one hidden behind walls, carved with clues in raised dots, a sort of braille left by the ancient people so that maybe someday someone worthy might solve the puzzle and find them again. Which is a strange thing to do, isn't it? To be so frightened of a thing that you lock it away, but to also leave careful instructions for how to find it, as if even in their fear they couldn't quite bear to lose it completely. They wanted it gone, and they wanted it findable, both at once. There's a whole storyline where you, the player, work out the braille, solve the puzzles, and wake these giants up one by one. And there's a lovely detail in how Regigigas fights when you finally reach it. It has an ability called Slow Start. For the first few moments of any battle, it's sluggish, weak, operating at half its real power, and only after it's been going for a while does it warm up into the world-shattering force it is. It's been asleep for so long, you see. It takes it a minute to remember what it is. I think that's a beautiful bit of design, a creature so ancient that it can't just switch on. It has to wake up properly first, shake off the centuries, before the strength comes back. Now, if Regigigas is the most physical, hands-on creature in the lot, then the strangest, by a good distance, has to be the unknown. And the unknown are hard to even describe. They're small, dark, floating things, and each one is shaped like a letter of the alphabet. There are 28 of them, one for each of the 26 letters, plus a question mark and an exclamation mark. A living, floating alphabet. And on their own, individually, they're almost pathetically weak. One of the feeblest creatures in the entire game. Statistically, a single unknown can't do much of anything. But together, that's a different matter. They live in a set of ancient ruins in Giotto, the ruins of Alf. And the ruins are a proper archaeological mystery, even within the world of the games. They're old, at least a millennium and a half, built by some clan nobody can identify. And the walls are carved with these unknown shapes. And this is the part that breaks the scientists' heads. The shapes match our alphabet. But the ruins predate any civilization that used that alphabet by a very long way. So either the unknown are based on ancient writing, or ancient writing is based on the unknown, and nobody can work out which came first. It's unclear, in the lore, whether these creatures are copying our letters or whether every letter you're reading right now is descended, somehow, from them. Whether language itself is a fossil of the unknown rather than the other way round, which is a properly vertiginous idea to have tucked into a corner of a Game Boy game. And when they gather, the unknown are said to be able to do things, to bend reality. There's a story where a lonely little girl's wishes get made physically real by a swarm of them, her imagination pouring out into the world and taking solid shape because the unknown were near, and the unknown, in numbers, can turn thought into matter. So this feeble little alphabet, weakest thing in the game, one at a time, might collectively be one of the most powerful forces in it. Words are like that too, I suppose. One letter is nothing. Enough of them in the right order can start wars or comfort a dying child, or convince a whole region to worship the wrong dragon. The unknown are just that idea, given little floating bodies, and when you solve all the puzzles in their ruins, the letters rearrange themselves into a message, left by that vanished clan, and part of it reads that humans must learn to walk in harmony with them, and that the clan departed for the creatures' sakes, which is about the gentlest, saddest thing an extinct civilization could leave behind. We left so they could be safe. Read the wall. I'll finish the world shapers with a thief, because not everything grand is noble. There's a creature called Hooper, a small impish, mischievous thing, and Hooper can open rings in the air. Golden hoops that punch straight through space, so that one ring here connects to another ring somewhere miles away, and Hooper can reach a hand through and grab whatever it fancies on the other side. And what it fancies mostly is treasure. Hooper is a compulsive thief on a cosmic scale. Its hidden lair, which nobody has ever found, is said to be piled high with gold and silver. It's stolen from the palaces of ancient kings, reached through and lifted away before anyone knew it was gone. There's a legend that it once wanted a treasure hidden inside a castle, and rather than break in, it simply opened a ring big enough and stole the entire castle. The whole building, pulled it through a hoop in the air to get at the one thing inside. This was in ancient Kalos as it happens, around the same era as that immortal king and his flower we spent a while with earlier, which I like, because it means all these enormous strange events are stacked up in the same few centuries of the same region's deep past jostling against each other. And Hooper has a second form, its true form, which it mostly can't access, because long ago its real power was frightening enough that someone sealed it away into a bottle, a prison bottle. So the mischievous little ring maker you usually see is the sealed, diminished version, and the true Hooper, six-armed and towering, and able to grow its rings miles wide and haul islands through the sky, only comes out when the seal is broken, and even then only for 3 days before the bottle pulls it back in. It's the same shape as so many of these, when you notice it, a tremendous power, feared, bound, locked away, leaking out only in a smaller, safer form. The world of Pokemon is absolutely littered with sealed and sleeping giants, things too big and too dangerous to be allowed to be fully themselves, shut in temples and bottles and frozen chambers, dreaming, waiting, warming up slowly, on the off chance somebody worthy comes along with the right puzzle and lets them finish waking up. The giants that shaped the world got sealed away out of fear. But fear isn't the only thing that makes a person lock power away, or reach for it, or try to remake the whole world in a shape they prefer. Some of the most dangerous figures in these games aren't monsters at all. They're people, ordinary, grieving, disappointed people who looked at the world, decided it was broken beyond fixing, and set out to end it and start again. And the strange thing about them, the thing I can never quite shake, is how much sense a few of them almost make. Here's something that took me a while to notice, and then I couldn't stop noticing it. The villains in Pokemon, the proper ones, the leaders of the criminal teams you spend each game working against, are almost never in it for the obvious reasons. They're not mostly cackling maniacs who want to watch things burn. They're something much stranger and, to me, much more interesting. They're disappointed. They've looked at the world, decided it's broken in some fundamental way, and concluded that the only honest response is to end it and build a better one. They're idealists, most of them. That's the unsettling part. The people trying to destroy the world usually think they're saving it. Take Cyrus. We met him earlier, briefly, the man on the mountaintop with the chain, dragging the dragons of time and space out of the sky to remake reality. And I told you then what he wanted. A universe without spirit, colder and stiller than this one. But I didn't tell you why, and the why is the whole thing. Because Cyrus wasn't born wanting to unmake the world. He was a clever, quiet, lonely boy who preferred machines to people because machines don't let you down and people do. He was a good student who never once felt like he'd lived up to what his parents wanted of him. He grew up feeling rejected, feeling like the warmth other people seemed to have came up short in him, and rather than conclude that he'd been hurt, he concluded something far colder. He decided that the feelings themselves were the problem. That emotion, spirit, all that messy wanting and hurting and hoping is the actual source of every conflict and every bit of suffering there has ever been. And that if you could just build a world without it, a perfectly still, perfectly rational, perfectly empty world, then nobody would ever suffer again because there'd be nobody left able to. And you can see it, can't you? That's the horrible part. You can follow the logic. A person who's only ever been hurt by feeling might come to believe that feeling is the wound and reach for a world where the wound can't happen. It's wrong. It's monstrous when you think about what it would cost. But it comes from pain, not malice. There's a detail I only learnt recently that finished me off completely. Cyrus has a grandfather, still alive, an old man living quietly out on some far route. And if you find him, he tells you that he regrets not taking the boy in when he needed someone. That's it. That's the whole tragedy in one line. An old man at the end of his life, knowing that somewhere out there, his grandson is trying to erase all human feeling from existence, and understanding that it might have gone differently if just one person had shown up for the boy when it mattered. The would-be destroyer of the universe was, once, a kid nobody came for. Then there's Lysandre over in Kalos, and Lysandre is the one that frightens me most, because he started out good. This isn't me guessing. There's an old friend of his in the games who'll tell you plainly that Lysandre was a kind man once, that he had noble intentions, that he spent his time and his considerable fortune trying to help people in need, trying properly for years. And it broke him, because he looked at the world he was pouring himself into, and he decided people were too stupid and too greedy to be worth saving, that the well would never fill no matter how much he poured in, and that his own power to help had limits he couldn't stand. And a man who loves the world that hard and then loses faith in it that completely doesn't become indifferent. He becomes something worse. He decided the only way to have a beautiful world was to have a small one, to use that ancient weapon we talked about, the one the immortal king built out of grief to wipe out almost everyone and keep the planet pristine and lovely for a chosen few, the worthy ones. And the way you proved you were worthy in his plan was money. You paid to be spared, which tells you everything, really, about what his noble intentions had curdled into. A philanthropist who lost his faith in people and came out the other side, deciding most of them didn't deserve to exist. That's a straight line, drawn from love to genocide, and the game lets you see every point along it. Not all of them are that dark, mind you. Over in Hoenn, there were two men, Archie and Maxie, who ran rival gangs, and one of them wanted to wake the great beast of the sea and expand the oceans, and the other wanted to wake the great beast of the land and expand the continents. And you'll remember what happens when you disturb those two. The 20-day catastrophe. The world nearly torn apart, the serpent having to come down out of the sky to sort it out. But here's what I love about Archie and Maxie, and what sets them apart from the others. Their goal wasn't destruction. Each of them sincerely believed he was making more of a good thing. More land for things to live on, more sea for things to live in. They wanted to expand the world, create habitat, roll it back to some purer primal state where nature reigned. They were environmentalists, near enough, just catastrophically overconfident ones. And crucially, when it all went wrong, when they saw the sky turn black and the land buckle and understood what they'd unleashed, they stopped. They were horrified. They pulled back and helped put right what they'd nearly broken and lived with it, which makes them almost unique in this rogues gallery. They're the ones who wanted to improve the world, made a terrible mistake, and had the grace to admit it. I've a lot more time for a villain who can say he got it wrong than for one who'd rather end everything than concede the point. And then, at the other end entirely, there's Getsis. And I'll be honest, I don't find Getsus sympathetic at all, and I don't think you're meant to. Because Getsus is the one who dressed his selfishness up as compassion, which is the worst version of all of them. His team, over in Unova, marched around preaching Pokemon liberation. Free the Pokemon. Stop enslaving them in your little balls. Stop making them fight for your amusement. Let them go and live free. And it's a good argument. That's the clever bit. It's the one uncomfortable question the whole franchise is built on top of. And we'll get to that question before the night's out. Team Plasma made people think about it, but it was a lie. Getsus didn't care about freeing anyone. His real plan was to convince everyone else in the world to release their Pokemon, so that he alone would still have his and could then conquer a defenseless world with the only monsters left in it. He took a real, painful, legitimate moral question and used it as a crowbar. And worse than that, far worse, is what he did to the boy. Because Getsus had a son of sorts, a young man called N, who could understand what Pokemon feel, who'd been raised deliberately isolated, surrounded only by Pokemon that humans had hurt, so that he'd grow up believing every word of the liberation cause with his whole pure heart. Getsus built that boy on purpose as a weapon, raised him in a curated little world of nothing but abused creatures so he'd become the perfect innocent figurehead for a cause his father didn't believe in. That's the coldest thing in any of these games, if you ask me. Not wanting to end the world, raising a child to be a tool and calling it love. And then right back at the beginning of everything, there's Giovanni. And Giovanni is almost refreshing after all that, because Giovanni just wants money and power. That's it. No philosophy, no broken idealism, no grief he's turned into a doctrine. He runs an organised crime syndicate, he steals Pokemon, he sells them, he exploits them for profit, he's building an empire, and he'd like it to be bigger. He is, in a funny way, the most honest villain in the whole franchise, precisely because he's the only one not lying to himself about why he's doing it. He's not trying to save anyone. He knows exactly what he is. And you'll remember what one of his operations cost back near the start of the night. In that town with the tower, the mother who put herself between her child and his men. That's the actual texture of Giovanni's ambition when you get down under the empire and the money. A dead animal on the floor and a frightened child running. No grand vision, just the ordinary, grinding cruelty of somebody who's decided other creatures are things you're allowed to use. What gets me, laying them all out side by side like this, is how many of them are grievers. Cyrus, grieving a childhood where nobody came. Lysandra, grieving his lost faith in a species he used to love. Even the immortal king we spent all that time with, in a sense, was the first of them. The original template, a man so broken by loss that he'd burn the world to spite it. They keep making the same person, the games over and over, in different costumes. Someone who loved something or wanted to, and got hurt badly enough that they decided the whole arrangement, the whole business of living and feeling and losing, was a mistake that ought to be corrected at the root. And every single time, what stops them isn't a stronger army or a cleverer plan. It's a kid, an 11-year-old with a handful of monsters they care about, who looks at the grand nihilistic vision and just, sort of, doesn't buy it, who's too busy loving their weird little team to be argued out of the world. There's a reason the games keep ending that way. It's not subtle, but it's true. The cure for a person whose decided feeling is the enemy turns out to be a child who feels too much to listen. That's the grand villainy then. The world enders and the grievers and the one honest crook. But not every strange creature in this world was born, or shaped, or reincarnated out of a fire. Some of them were made, built deliberately, by people, in labs and workshops, for reasons that range from the noble to the deeply unsettling. And once you start pulling on that thread, the man-made ones, you end up right at the strangest and most uncomfortable question the whole franchise has got. The one Getsus was lying about but wasn't wrong to raise. The workshop's next then, and the things that got put together by hand. We spent a long while earlier with the most famous made creature of them all, the one in the tank, born out of grief and a scientist's ambition. But it wasn't the first thing people in this world built, and it wasn't the last, and the others are worth a look, because the range of them is strange. People in the world of Pokemon have been making creatures, on and off, for a very long time, and their reasons run all the way from cold curiosity to something that looks a lot like love. The first one they made deliberately, with modern technology, was Porygon. And Porygon is a lovely oddity, because it isn't made of flesh at all. It's made of code, computer data, given a body. It was built in a lab, the same island lab, as it happens, where a certain other experiment would later go so badly wrong, and it was hailed as the first virtual reality creature, a living program. And because it's software rather than an animal, it can do software things. It can travel into cyberspace, move through computer systems, exist inside a machine. Its whole polygonal, blocky, faceted look is the point. It looks like an early bit of 3D graphics because that's essentially what it is, a picture that learned to be alive. And there's a detail I adore. They built copy protection into it, anti-piracy code, to stop people illegally duplicating it, because it's software, and software gets copied. Except it turns out you can breed Porygon the ordinary way, so the copy protection is completely useless, which is the most true-to-life thing about the whole enterprise. Somebody built a digital creature, and then panicked about intellectual property, and nature just went round the side of it, the way it always does. There's a heavier one, and it's called Genesect. Genesect started out as an ordinary living creature, a bug, a real animal, roughly 300 million years ago. It swam or scuttled around in some primordial sea, lived its little prehistoric life, died, and became a fossil. And there it stayed for 300 million years, until Team Plasma, the Liberation lot with the lying leader we just met, dug it up, and they revived it, which the games have long been able to do, bring things back from fossils. But they weren't content to just have an ancient bug. They wanted the strongest creature in the world, so they rebuilt it, bolted a metal shell onto it, and mounted an enormous cannon on its back, and turned this 300 million year old animal into a living weapon. There's a horrible little wrinkle to it too, which is that the pure-hearted boy figurehead of that team, the one who could hear what Pokemon feel, tried to shut the project down when he found out, and they just did it behind his back. So Genesect is a creature that died before the dinosaurs, was resurrected by people who claimed to want Pokemon free, and got a gun grafted to its spine for its trouble, over the objections of the one person in the organisation who meant what he said. Liberation apparently had an exception for the profitable ones. And then, at the far other end of the whole spectrum, there's Magiana. And Magiana is the one that changes how you think about all of this. Because Magiana is a machine. Unambiguously. It's a clockwork thing, all brass and rounded joints, and its Pokédex category is literally the artificial Pokemon. Built by hand. But it was built more than 5 centuries ago, by a single inventor, and it was built as a gift, a present for a king's daughter. Somebody wanted to give a princess something precious, and rather than a jewel or a crown, they made her a friend, a little mechanical companion, designed to understand human speech, to sense how people are feeling, to look after them. And here's the part that undoes me. In its chest, this clockwork creature has a core, and the core is called the soul heart. And the soul heart is described as a genuine, actual soul. An artificial one, made on purpose, but a real one. The thing can feel. It feels other creatures' pain as if it were its own, and it spends its existence trying to keep the people around it well. So you've got a machine, built out of gears, that has a soul that was crafted for it, and that soul's entire nature is empathy. It was made to care, and the making worked. Which raises a question the games are far too breezy to sit with, but which I can't put down. If you can build a soul, and the soul you build turns out to be kinder than most of the ones that grew the natural way, then what exactly is the difference? What's the line? Morgiana is 500 years of clockwork, and it loves better than half the humans in these games. I don't have anywhere to put that. I just carry it around. There's a theory I have to mention while we're in the workshop, because it's the sort of thing that lives rent-free in the head of anyone who thinks about this stuff too much. And it concerns Ditto. Ditto's the little pink blob, the one that can transform into a perfect copy of any other creature it sees. Cheerful, harmless, faintly comical, always wearing the same daft little smile, even when it's turned itself into a dragon. And the theory, and I want to be clear, it is a theory, the games never confirm it, is that Ditto is a failed attempt to clone Mew. Think about it. Both of them are pink. Both of them are exactly the same weight, to the kilogram. Mew, the ancestor creature, is said to contain the DNA of every Pokemon and can transform into any of them, and Ditto's entire ability is transforming into any of them, just sloppily, imperfectly, keeping that goofy face no matter what shape it takes. So the idea goes that when they were trying to clone the strongest creature in the world, all those experiments on Mew's genetic material, the successes and the failures, didn't just produce the one famous monster. They produced a whole run of botched attempts, copies that didn't quite work. And Ditto is one of those, a half-made Mew, a clone that came out able to copy anything, but never able to become anything, wandering around with a smile painted on, a factory second of the ancestor of all life. Whether it's true or not, and it's probably not, it does that lovely thing the best fan theories do, where you can't unsee it afterwards. You look at a Ditto now and you think, oh, you poor thing, is that what you are? And that brings me, finally, to the ones that make you uneasy, if you follow the thread. Voltorb and its bigger form, Electrode. And these two are, unmistakably, Pokeballs. They look exactly like a Pokeball, the little red and white sphere you catch everything in, except with a pair of angry eyes, and the Pokédex, hedging as ever, offers you a rumour. It says Voltorb first appeared at the company where modern Pokeballs were being developed, at the factory, and that it's believed, whispered, that Voltorb came into being when a Pokeball was exposed to some powerful pulse of energy and simply, spontaneously, came to life. A Pokeball that woke up. And now it rolls around, this living ball, prone to exploding at the slightest provocation, looking for all the world like the very object you're about to use to capture something else. And that's where it gets uncomfortable, if you let it. Because stay with it a moment, here in the quiet. The thing you catch creatures in might, under the right circumstances, be alive. The container might be a creature too, which turns the whole gentle business of the game slightly inside out. You go around the world and you find wild animals and you keep them inside little spheres and carry them about and send them out to fight, and it's all perfectly cheerful. And nobody, in all these games, in all these years, ever really stops to ask what it's like in there. Inside the ball, whether it's a cozy little pocket dimension or a dark, cramped nothing, whether the creature is asleep or waiting or aware. The games are very careful never to answer that, because the answer might spoil the fun. And I understand that, I do. But Voltorb sits there, a ball with a face, exploding when it's upset, quietly asking the question the whole franchise is built on top of, and would rather you didn't think about. What is the ball? And what's it like to be in one? I'll leave that where it is for now, because we'll come back to it properly before the night's out. And it's a bit much to fall asleep on. All of these, the coded one, and the fossil weapon, and the clockwork soul, and the sad little failed copy, and the ball that woke up, all of them were made here, on the ground, by human hands, for human reasons. But not everything in this world started here. Some of these creatures didn't come out of a lab, or an egg, or a fossil, or the deep sea. Some of them came from a very long way away. They fell out of the sky, on meteors, and in strange lights. And they've never quite belonged to this world at all. The ones that came from space, then. We can look up for a while. If you go up a mountain in the first region, Kanto, you come to a place called Mount Moon. And Mount Moon is a cave, and buried inside it is a great meteorite, a rock that fell from the sky a very long time ago. And the creatures that live there, the ones that gather around that fallen stone, are Clefairy, little round pink fairy things, about as unthreatening as anything the games have ever drawn. All big eyes and tiny wings, and a general air of a soft toy that's learned to walk. And there's a strong, persistent, never quite confirmed suggestion running through the whole franchise that these adorable little creatures are aliens, that they came from the moon. It's never stated flat out. That's what I like about it. It's a suspicion the games keep nursing rather than a fact they declare. But the hints pile up until they're hard to ignore. They cluster around a fallen meteorite. They only evolve using a moonstone, a rock that's implied to be a shard of meteorite, charged with some strange lunar energy. And there's an event in a couple of the games where on certain nights of a full moon or a meteor shower, the Clefairy gather in a clearing and dance, in a ring, together in the moonlight, this little congregation of pink creatures dancing under the stars. And nobody's ever fully explained what the dance is for. But the newest game slipped in a detail that broke my heart a bit. A researcher mentions that Clefairy's final form, Clefable, will sometimes cock its head and listen, very intently, as if it's straining to hear something, listening for others of its own kind, living on the moon. And the researcher says it makes him feel homesick, watching it, though he's never left home in his life. That's the whole thing, isn't it? A creature so gentle and so small that might have come from somewhere impossibly far away, standing in a field at night listening for the sound of home. A home it can see hanging in the sky, but can never, ever get back to. And one of the Pokédex entries for its baby form just says plainly that on nights lit by shooting stars, it gazes up at the sky as if thinking of its home. They put that in a children's game. A homesick alien looking up. The one where the sky origin is beyond doubt, though, is Deoxys. And Deoxys has what might be my favourite origin of any creature in the whole lot, because it's so cold and so strange and so unlike a birth. Deoxys didn't hatch. It didn't evolve. It wasn't made in a lab exactly, though a machine was involved. Deoxys started life as a virus drifting through space, clinging to a meteor, the way a real virus is barely alive at all, just a scrap of genetic code looking for something to copy itself into. And the meteor fell to Earth. And at some point the games say that alien virus was struck by a laser beam, and the beam mutated it, rewrote its DNA, scrambled and rebuilt it, and out of that accident, a virus plus a laser, a living, thinking creature came into being. Deoxys, its very name, is a piece of the word for DNA. It's got a crystalline gem in the centre of its chest, and that gem, unusually, isn't a heart, it's the brain. It thinks with a jewel in its chest, and it's intensely intelligent and deeply alone, and it communicates when it meets another of its kind, not with sound but by painting auroras across the sky. Two alien creatures talking to each other in the northern lights, and it can rearrange its own body, shift between forms, one built for attacking, one for defending, one for fleeing, because it's a thing designed by no one, evolved for no particular world, just trying to survive somewhere it was never meant to be. It even, in one story, ends up clashing with the great serpent of the ozone we met early on, the one that lives at the top of the sky eating stardust. Two things from the edge of space, meeting where the atmosphere thins out, neither of them really belonging to the ground below. There's something so lonely about Deoxys. A mistake. A virus that a laser turned into a person, thinking its jeweled thoughts, painting lights in the sky, hoping something out there paints back. Then there are the ones the games have a bit of fun with, and I mean the little grey men. Elgium and what it grows into. Beheum. And these are, unmistakably, aliens of the classic sort. The Roswell sort. Big bald grey heads, huge dark eyes, spindly bodies, that whole flying saucer, close encounters, men in black silhouette that every culture on Earth now recognises. And the games lean all the way into the joke. Their names are built from the old slang, Elgiem from LGM, Little Green Men, and Behem from BEM, Bug-Eyed Monster, the Pulp Fiction terms for exactly this kind of creature. And the lore is pure conspiracy theory, lovingly done. They say Elgiem first turned up about 50 years ago, appearing suddenly in a stretch of desert, at the site of what everyone believes was a crashed spacecraft. And they've got abilities cribbed straight from the abduction stories. They can mess with your memories, wiping and rearranging them with flashes of light from the dots on their hands, which is precisely what the little grey men are supposed to do to the people they take. They make televisions flicker and show strange images when they're nearby. Behem even looks, honestly, like an alien wearing a trench coat and hat, an extraterrestrial trying and failing to pass as a person, and they hang around an old tower where the dead are remembered. And some reckon it's because they're still trying, all these years later, to send a signal home. It's affectionate, all of it. It's the games having a laugh with a familiar bit of modern folklore. But underneath the joke is the same note that Clefairy hits. Something that arrived here by accident, stranded tinkering with the locals' memories and their television sets, still quietly trying to phone home. I'll gather up a few more quickly, because the sky's full of them once you start looking. There are two creatures, Lunatone and Solrock, one shaped like a crescent moon and one shaped like the sun, and they're known outright as the meteorite Pokemon, because they were first discovered at the site of a meteor strike a few decades back, and they draw their strength from moonlight and sunlight respectively. You find them, fittingly, in a place called Meteor Falls, a cave built around the point where something came down. There are the starfish, Staryu and Starmie, which some say aren't really sea creatures at all, but things that fell into the ocean from above, and which gather at night to flash the glowing cores in their centres, up at the stars, as if signalling or answering. And there's the ancient husk we met a while ago, the frozen leftover dragon in the chasm, that one town swears rode down inside a meteor made of ice, whatever the truth of it turns out to be. What gets me about all of them, laid out together, is how quietly they've been absorbed. Nobody in the world of Pokemon seems remotely troubled that a good chunk of their wildlife is extraterrestrial. The little grey men are just another entry in the encyclopedia. The homesick moon fairies dance in the woods, and people go, "Oh, lovely, look at the Clefairy," and set up a bench to watch. A virus that a laser turned into a thinking creature is filed under mythical and given a catch rate. There's no panic, no government cover-up, no war of the worlds. They just came down on their meteors and in their crashed saucers and on their shafts of moonlight, and they moved in, and they became part of the furniture, part of the ecosystem, part of the long list of things a child is expected to catch and befriend. And maybe that's the gentlest possible version of the whole idea, that when the aliens finally arrived, in this world, nobody screamed. They just made room, pulled up a chair, learned the creatures' habits, wrote them into the guidebook, and let them dance in the moonlight if that's what they wanted to do. It's a nicer first contact than we'd probably manage. Not everything old came from the sky, though. Some of it was here all along, buried in the rock under our feet waiting. Because if you dig down in the world of Pokemon, past the towns and the roads and the graves, you start finding the dead. Fossils, creatures that lived and died hundreds of millions of years ago, pressed into stone. And people have worked out how to bring them back. The stars can keep for a while, though. There's deep time to dig down into instead, and the things that get pulled back out of it. There's a museum in the first region, in a town called Pewter, and if you go into the back rooms, the bits the public don't usually reach, you find the fossils. Great stone skeletons of creatures that died hundreds of millions of years ago, long before there were people, long before there was anything much to see them. And the thing about the world of Pokemon, the thing that makes those fossils more than just old bones behind glass, is that they've worked out how to bring them back. It's the same trick, more or less, wherever you find it. You dig up a fossil, a specific one, and you take it to a laboratory, and the scientists there extract whatever's left, the genetic material, the pattern of the thing, and they regrow it. and out walks a creature that has been dead since before the dinosaurs, blinking in the light of a world that moved on without it by a few 100 million years. There's Kabuto, a little armoured thing like a horseshoe crab, pulled back from a fossil shaped like a dome. There's Omanite, a spiral-shelled creature like an ammonite, regrown from a fossil shaped like a helix. And there's Aerodactyl, the big leathery flying reptile, the pterosaur. And I have a real soft spot for how they bring that one back. Because Aerodactyl doesn't come from a bone. It comes from old amber, from a creature's genetic material, preserved inside a lump of ancient tree resin, exactly like a certain famous film about a dinosaur park that came out around the same time. Somebody at the studio watched that film, clearly, and thought, we'll have that, and tucked a whole Jurassic Park into the corner of a monster game. And the lab where you revive them on Cinnabar Island is the very same island, the very same kind of lab, where they'd later grow a creature out of a fossilized eyelash and a scientist's grief. That island has form when it comes to bringing things back that maybe should have stayed where they were. Because that's the shadow over all of this, isn't it? And it's a shadow we've stood in before tonight. Resurrection, bringing back the dead. We had it with the golden bird over the burning tower, giving 3 creatures a second life, and getting met with fear for it. We had it with the immortal king, dragging his flower back from the grave at the cost of hundreds of other lives. We had it with the dead professor, at the bottom of the crater, reaching into deep time to pull creatures forward into a world they didn't belong in. And here it is again, dressed up as archaeology, a whole casual industry of it. Dig up the dead, regrow them, pop them in a ball, add them to your team. Nobody frets about it. Nobody asks whether Aerodactyl wanted to come back, whether it's frightened, whether the world it woke up in means anything to a creature whose entire actual world has been dust for longer than mammals have existed. It just gets a Pokédex number and a catch rate, like everything else. There's one creature that sidesteps the whole business, and it's my favourite thing in this entire section, and it's called Relicanth. Relicanth is a fish, a drab, grey, lumpy, unremarkable looking fish, the sort of thing you'd walk straight past. And it's a living fossil. Not revived from stone, not regrown in a lab, it's just still here. Relicanth has apparently existed, essentially unchanged, for something like 100 million years. It found a shape that worked, deep down in the cold, dark water, where nothing bothers it and nothing changes, and it simply stopped. Stopped evolving, stopped adapting, stopped needing to. While the continents drifted, and the giant died out, and the mammals arrived, and the people built their towns and their museums, Relicanth just carried on being exactly what it always was, down in the deep, minding its own business. It's based on a real creature, the coelacanth, a fish everyone thought had died out with the dinosaurs until one turned up in a net in the 1930s. Alive, unchanged, having quietly ignored its own extinction for millions of years. And I find that so much more moving than the resurrections. The dead you dig up and force back into the light are one kind of story, but the one that never left, the one that found its shape and kept it while the whole world churned around it, the ugly grey fish that outlasted everything by the simple trick of not changing. That's a different kind of story altogether. That's just endurance. Quiet, unglamorous, unbroken endurance. No one had to bring Relicanth back, because Relicanth never went anywhere. There is one revived creature, though, that I cannot stop thinking about, because its whole existence is a quiet little tragedy folded into a catch rate. It is called Amora, and it is brought back the way you would expect, from a fragment of itself that had been frozen solid in ice for something like 100 million years. It is a gentle, long-necked, dinosaurish thing, pale blue, with 2 soft sail-like frills running back off its head that shift colour with its mood and glow, faintly, like the northern lights. In the ancient world it came from, it lived somewhere cold and calm, a frozen land with almost nothing around that wanted to hurt it. And it drifted about being peaceful and being beautiful, and then the ice took it, and that was that, for 100 million years. And now a laboratory has pulled it back into the light, regrown from the frozen scrap, alive again, blinking at the modern world. And here is the line that gets me, tucked into its own description, with no fuss at all. It notes that Amora has been revived successfully, but that it is not expected to live very long, because the world today is simply too warm for it. Let that settle for a moment. It survived being frozen for 100 million years. It outlasted its whole era, its whole climate, the entire cold world it was built for. And the thing that finally undoes it is not time, or predators, or the ice. It is the temperature of the present. We reached back across 100 million years, went to all that trouble to bring it home, and the home we brought it to is quietly killing it, because it is the wrong warmth, and there is nothing anyone can do about that. It glows like an aurora, and it grows into its fuller shape only at night, and it is not going to be here very long, and nobody in the world seems to think that is worth slowing down for. Of all the dead we dig back up, Amora is the one I would have maybe left asleep in the ice. I'll end the dig on the darkest bit, because it's the one that stuck the deepest for me, and it comes from the Galar region, the British one. Because in Galar, the fossil revival goes wrong, properly wrong, and on purpose as a bit of design. In Galar, you don't revive a whole creature from one fossil. You have to combine two separate fossils, a top half and a bottom half, and the machine fuses them into one living animal. And the halves don't match. You get a creature with the head of one thing and the body of another. A fish's head on a dinosaur's legs. A bird's top half welded to a reptile's tail. And the games are completely explicit that this is a disaster for the creatures themselves. Their bodies are wrong, mismatched, built in combinations that were never meant to exist, and as a result they cannot live properly. One of them has a powerful upper body and tiny useless legs, and can barely move. One has a head designed for water stuck on a body that lives on land, so it's slowly suffocating. They're in pain, essentially, by construction. And it's a reference to something real and grim from the history of actual paleontology. The days when rival fossil hunters, working too fast and too carelessly, would assemble skeletons wrong, stick the wrong skull on the wrong body, mount things upside down, just to get a complete-looking specimen up before their competitors. So the games took that, the arrogance of it, the carelessness, and made it flesh. Made living creatures out of the mistake, creatures that suffer because the people who brought them back couldn't be bothered to get them right. It's the resurrection theme at its bleakest. Not just, should you bring the dead back, but what do you owe them if you do? And the answer Galar gives, quietly, through these poor patched together things limping around, is that people mostly don't stop to ask. Right, that's enough digging in the dark for a bit. Time to come back up to the surface then, out into the open air, where there are some creatures in this world that were never sealed or buried or dug up at all. They're out there right now, roaming, restless things that won't be caught, won't stay still, won't come when they're called. Some of them have been running for a very long time, and some of them are running from us specifically. And one of them is what happens when an ordinary creature is pushed past the point it was ever meant to go. Some creatures in this world are weather. Not creatures that control the weather exactly, though they do that too. Creatures that more or less are the weather in the way we talked about the land and the sea being creatures back at the start. And the oldest three of these are the legendary birds of the first region, Articuno, Zapdos and Moltres, ice and lightning and fire, given wings. And they don't sit still. That's the thing about them that I find lovely, and that the games mostly forget to make a fuss about. They're migratory. They roam the whole world, endlessly, and the weather moves with them, because they bring it. When Moltres passes over somewhere, every beat of its burning wings warms the air, and an early spring comes to wherever it's flying. When Articuno crosses a region, snow falls behind it, and if it's in a temper, it'll pull a full blizzard down out of a clear sky. And Zapdos, my favourite of the three for sheer strangeness of habit, doesn't just make thunderstorms, it follows them. It chases the summer storms around the world and hides inside the thunderheads and feeds on the electricity they throw off. A bird that lives inside lightning and eats it. So a change in the season, a sudden freak snow, a run of storms that won't quit, might not be weather at all in this world. It might be one of 3 enormous birds passing overhead, dragging the climate along behind it like a cloak. They're solitary and they're territorial, and they don't get on. Left to themselves, they mostly stay apart, one to a stretch of the world. But when they do meet, when their territories cross, they fight. And their fighting is a genuine catastrophe, because it means fire and ice and lightning all going off at once in the same patch of sky, and the weather of the whole planet lurching about as they go at each other. And there's only one thing that can stop them, and we've met it already tonight. The great silver creature that fled the burning tower for the sea. Lugia. Because Lugia is the one they answer to. When the 3 of them fall into their disastrous 3-way quarrel, and the world starts coming apart at the seams, it's Lugia that rises up out of the deep and calms them, and sends them back to their corners, and lets the seasons settle, which recasts that quiet creature we met hiding in the whirlpools, doesn't it? It didn't just run away from the tower and give up. It's still got a job. It's still down there in the dark water, ready to come up if the 3 birds ever forget themselves badly enough to threaten everything. The guardian of the sea, keeping the peace between fire and ice and lightning. From the bottom of the ocean, where nobody can see it work. That's the restless ones. The ones that were always going to roam, because roaming is simply what they are. But there's a different kind of creature I want to end this stretch on, and it's a much sadder one, because it wasn't born restless. It was made that way, forced, and it lives in a lake in Giotto, a lake with a name that tells you everything. The Lake of Rage. Here's what happened there. There's a fish called Magikarp, and Magikarp is the great joke of the whole franchise. The runt, the useless one. It's a floppy orange fish that can't do anything. It splashes. That's its whole deal. It flails about on land. It's hopeless in a fight. It's the creature every player groans at catching. But Magikarp has a secret, which is that if you're patient with it, if you let it grow up in its own time, at its own pace, it eventually becomes Gyarados. And Gyarados is a monster, a vast, serpentine, dragon-looking thing, all fury and fangs, one of the most frightening creatures in the early games. The lore even says that when a Magikarp evolves, something restructures in its brain, and that structural change is what floods it with all that violent rage. Growing up, for a Magikarp, is a violent business. It goes from the gentlest joke in the game to something terrifying, and the terror is baked into the transformation itself. And at the Lake of Rage, Team Rocket, the crooks, worked out how to force it. They set up a machine, a radio transmitter, hidden away in a nearby town, broadcasting a signal that forced every Magikarp in the lake to evolve, all at once, whether they were ready or not, whether they'd grown enough or not. A whole lake full of gentle, useless little fish dragged into that violent transformation early, against their nature, for the crooks to study and profit from. And the lake filled up with rampaging Gyarados, enraged, confused, made monstrous before their time, thrashing the water and tipping over boats, and terrifying the people who lived nearby. That's why it's called the Lake of Rage. It's a lake full of creatures that were forced to grow up too fast and came out furious. And there's one Gyarados in that lake that's different from the rest. It's red, bright red, where every other Gyarados is blue. And the reason it's red, the games tell us, is heartbreakingly simple. The forced evolution happened so fast, was pushed through so violently, that the creature never had time to finish changing. Its scales never made the shift from the red of its old self to the blue of its new one. It got yanked from one form to the next, so hard that a piece of what it used to be got stuck to it. Frozen in the wrong colour, a permanent mark of having been rushed. It's not special because it's rare. It's special because it's damaged. A visible scar in the shape of the wrong colour, from being made to become something before it was ready. And and when the player finds the source of the signal and destroys the machine, the transmitter that was forcing all this, the red Gyarados, calms down. The rage goes out of it. It stops thrashing and it turns and it dives back down into the quiet depths of the lake. And it's peaceful again, because it was never really a monster. None of them were. They were just fish that got forced, and the fury was the forcing, not the creature. Take away the thing that was pushing them, and they settle. That idea of forced transformation is worth pausing on, because it turns up all over these games once you notice it. The little cloud creature made to open too many rifts before it was strong enough. The boy raised to be a weapon for a cause he didn't choose. The professor who left a copy of themselves to keep working long after they should have been allowed to rest. Over and over, someone or something gets pushed to become what it wasn't ready to be for someone else's purposes, and comes out the other side, wrong and angry or hollow or the wrong colour. And the fix, every time, isn't to fight the thing that got broken. It's to find the machine that's doing the pushing and switch it off, and let the poor creature settle back into whatever it was meant to be. Speaking of things not being what they seem, there's a whole quiet category of creatures in this world whose entire trick is that you can't trust your own eyes around them. Things that lie in the most literal sense. Illusions given a body, and shape stealers, and one made thing in particular that was built to be a god and turned out to be a frightened animal in a mask. So we can settle into the Hall of Mirrors for a little while with the ones you can't quite believe. There's a fox in these games that lies, not in a small way. It lies with its whole body, and with the air around it, and with the very ground you're standing on. It's called Zoroark, and it's the illusion fox, and it might be the best liar in the entire world of Pokemon. Here's what Zoroark can do. It can make you see things that aren't there, not little tricks, not a shimmer in the corner of your eye. Complete, seamless, waking dreams that it paints over reality, and it can do it to hundreds of people at once. It can make an entire forest look like something it isn't, so that anyone who wanders in gets lost in scenery that doesn't exist, walking in circles through a landscape Zoroark invented, until they give up and leave, which is exactly what Zoroark wanted. It can take the shape of another creature, or of a person, a full human being, and when it wears a human shape, it can speak with a human voice. It can even conjure up illusions of attacks so convincing that you'll believe you've been hit, that you'll feel it, though nothing touched you. It fools cameras, it fools crowds. There is, functionally, no way to be sure that what you're looking at, when a Zoroark is nearby, is real. And the reason it has all this power is, I think, the loveliest part. Because a Zoroark starts life as a Zora, and a Zora is a timid little thing, shy, easily frightened, and the games say, quite plainly, that it's precisely that timidity that gave rise to the illusions in the first place. A small, scared creature, too fragile to defend itself the normal way, that learned instead to lie, to make frightening things appear, to make itself look like something bigger, to hide its den behind a wall of images, because it couldn't survive any other way. The greatest deceiver in the world is, at bottom, a nervous animal that was too soft for a hard world and had to invent a way to cope. There's something very tender in that. The lying isn't malice, it's armour. It's what fear builds when it can't build muscle. And Zoroark uses it, mostly, for love. That's the thing the games are careful to establish. Zoroark live in close-knit little groups, fiercely bonded, and a Zoroark will do absolutely anything to protect the ones it cares about. It hides its babies, its Zorua, tucked up inside its great mane of red fur, carries them around in there, where nothing can get at them. It throws illusions around its family like a blanket, and there's a story from one of the films that shows you both the beauty and the horror of what that power means in the wrong hands. A businessman captured a Zoroark, and he filmed its illusions, and then he edited the footage, cut it together to make it look as though the Zoroark was rampaging through a city, destroying everything, a monster on the loose. And he broadcast that, and forced everyone to evacuate in terror, so that with the city empty, he was free to go after what he wanted. And the way he kept the Zoroark obedient, the way he made it keep performing, was by holding its adopted Zorua hostage. So you've got a creature whose gift is making people see things that aren't real, being used by a man who makes people see things that aren't real, footage doctored to frame the innocent thing as the villain. That was made years ago, that film, and it has aged into something that feels uncomfortably like a documentary about the times we're living in now. A creature that can fake anything, and a man who uses that to manufacture a lie the whole public swallows. They put it in a Pokemon movie. It's about a fox. There's a darker version of Zoroark, from that ancient region we keep brushing up against, the deep past one. And it's one of the most upsetting designs they've ever done. So I'll keep it brief. In the old days, Zorua and Zoroark were driven out of the lands where people lived, chased away because their illusions frightened everyone, exiled into a harsh, cold wilderness where they couldn't survive. And they died there, cast out and dead of the cold and the hardship. But they didn't stay gone. The lore says they came back, reborn out of pure spite, out of the sheer force of their resentment at being driven out to die. Ghostly, white, dishevelled things whose illusions aren't gentle armour anymore, but pure malice, powerful enough to drive a person mad with terror, so full of hatred for every living thing that the illusions harm the body as well as the mind. A creature killed by human fear that came back as the thing they were afraid of. And yet, and this is the detail that finishes me, even that spiteful ghost fox, that embodiment of death and resentment, is still tender with its young, still hides its Zorua, still, underneath all that reborn hatred, protects the one small thing it loves. It came back from the dead furious at the entire world, and it kept the one soft spot. I don't know why that wrecks me as much as it does, but it does. And then there's the thing they built to be a god, that turned out to be a frightened animal in a mask. And it's the one I want to leave you with here, because it ties a lot of tonight's threads together. It's called Type Null, and it was made deliberately in a lab by an organisation trying to create the ultimate weapon, a creature that could fight the monsters from the other dimensions we talked about, the ones that come through the rifts in the sky. And to build it, they didn't clone one creature. They took pieces of many, bits of different Pokemon, stitched into a single chimera, a patchwork animal built from parts. And the model they were working from, the blueprint for the ultimate creature, was the god, the egg from nothing. They were, in a very real sense, trying to build their own Arceus, the way that other lab tried to build its own Mew, a homemade god assembled from spare parts to be pointed at the enemy. And it didn't work, or rather, it worked too well. The creatures they made were too powerful, and the system that let them channel that power, the thing that was meant to make them controllable, they rejected it, went berserk, couldn't be handled, so the project was declared a failure, and the creatures were frozen, put into cold storage, and fitted with a heavy iron mask, a control helmet clamped over the head that held all that dangerous power down, kept it suppressed, kept the creature manageable, at the cost of never letting it be what it was. A made god, judged, a failure, locked in ice with a cage bolted over its face. And here's how it gets free, and it's the whole point really. It doesn't get free by force, it doesn't blast the mask off, it gets free through friendship. If one of these masked, frozen, failed weapons is shown genuine kindness, if it bonds with someone, trusts them, then it evolves. It becomes Silvally, and in the moment of that evolution, it tears off its own mask, destroys the helmet itself from the inside, and steps out finally able to control its own power without going mad, because the thing that was missing was never a better cage. It was trust. It was somebody caring about it. The lab tried every kind of restraint and every kind of force, and the only thing that ever worked was the one thing a laboratory can't manufacture. A friend. They built a god and couldn't finish it because the last component turned out to be love. And you can't synthesize that. You have to give it. I keep noticing the masks. That's the thread, if there is one, running through all of these. The ghost carrying the golden face it wore. when it was a person. The lonely thing in the tatty homemade costume, hiding what it really is because the truth would kill you. The fox wearing 100 borrowed faces to keep its babies safe. The maid god with the iron helmet bolted over its own. Over and over, these creatures are hiding behind something, a mask or an illusion or a disguise, and nearly every time, when you finally get underneath it, what's there is something frightened and lonely, and just trying not to be hurt. The mask is never the monster. The mask is what the monster wears, because the world wasn't safe to show its face in. There's one last quiet thing I've been meaning to get to, that's been sitting under all of this the whole time. We've talked about catching these creatures, and keeping them, and battling them, and I've never quite said out loud what that involves. So we can turn it over gently for a bit, the ball, and what we're really doing when we go and catch a monster. Nothing urgent in it. Just a thought I like to sit with. The most familiar object in the whole of Pokemon is a little sphere. Red on the top, white on the bottom, a button in the middle. You have seen it about 10,000 times, on the boxes and the logos and the badges and the app you might be holding right now. And because you've seen it so often, you have almost certainly stopped seeing it at all. It has quietly become wallpaper again, the way the whole series was wallpaper before you ever started reading the small print. So I want to spend a little while just looking at the ball, because it might be the strangest thing in the entire world, and it has been hiding in plain sight this whole time, right there in your hand. Here is what it does, described plainly, with none of the softening the music usually gives it. You find a wild creature, a living animal with a mind and moods, and, as we have spent all night establishing, sometimes a dead mother and a story that could break your heart. You have a fight with it. You wear it down, and then you throw a small metal ball at it, and the ball opens, and the creature is pulled inside, folded up somehow into a space far too small to hold it, and the ball snaps shut and wobbles and clicks. And now it belongs to you. It lives in there now, in the ball in your pocket, until you decide otherwise. And the thing I find quietly astonishing is that the games almost never explain how any of that works. This is the single most important piece of technology in the entire world. The whole society runs on it, and the mechanism is just left blank. Some corners of the lore suggest the creature is converted into some sort of energy for storage, turned briefly from a body into information and back again. Others barely gesture at it, but the core games themselves mostly decline to say. The most used object in the world is the one nobody will explain, and I love that, because it is very true to life. We all carry around miracles we have stopped questioning. The ball is just the purest example. Where the balls come from is its own small pleasure. You would assume they are all factory-made, stamped out by the million in some Sylph company plant in the big city. And most of them are, but not all. In a quiet town in Johto, there is an old man named Kurt, and Kurt makes Pokeballs by hand, the old way, carved out of fruit. There are 7 kinds of a thing called an apricorn, which grow on trees, and each colour makes a different sort of ball, and Kurt will take one from you and disappear into his workshop and hand it back the next day as something you can catch a creature in. It takes him a full day to make one. And there is something I find deeply reassuring about that. In a world of mass-produced miracles, one stubborn old man in one small town still treats the miracle as a craft, still makes them slowly, one at a time, out of fruit off a tree. I would trust a ball from Kurt more than a ball from a factory, and I could not tell you why. Now, the comfortable way to read the ball, the way the games mostly want you to read it, is as a home, a safe little pocket dimension where a well-loved creature happily rests between adventures. And there is real evidence for that reading, which is the nice thing. A creature that trusts you will sit calmly in its ball and come out glad to see you. A creature that does not trust you can refuse. There is a whole mechanic, tucked into the games, where a monster that thinks little of you will not obey, will turn away, will sometimes not stay caught at all. The ball is not a cage exactly, because a cage does not need the prisoner's cooperation, And this, on some level, does. A bond has to be there, or the whole thing stops working. That is a quietly reassuring detail, and I hold on to it. There is one exception to all of that, and it is worth a moment on its own. Somewhere in the world there exists a single design of ball that simply never fails. The master ball. You throw it at anything, and it catches first time, no fight required, no wearing down, no bond, no chance at all of escape. A legend, the proudest and largest creature in existence, a god if you can find one, none of it matters. The master ball takes it cleanly, and there is nothing the creature can do about it. And the telling thing, the detail I keep turning over, is that they are almost impossible to come by. The company that makes them made, in effect, won. You are handed a single master ball across a whole adventure and never offered a second. And the reason given is that they are so difficult and so costly to produce that the idea of mass producing them was quietly abandoned. Which is a relief when you sit with it, because a world with a cheap and endless supply of guaranteed catches is a properly frightening place to imagine. It would mean anyone could take anything. Any creature, any legend, any sleeping god, plucked out of the sky by whoever could afford the throw. The whole uneasy business of the ball, all of it, the bonds and the cooperation, and the question of whether the creature agrees to be kept, only stays bearable, because catching is hard. The master ball is a little glimpse of what it looks like when catching stops being hard, and I think it is quietly to the game's credit that they built exactly one, pressed it into your hand with a slightly nervous shrug, and then never, ever let you have another. But you can hold the uncomfortable reading in your other hand at the same time, and I think the games are quietly brave for letting you, because a whole group of people in this world, once, stood up and argued out loud that the balls were wrong, that keeping a living thing folded up in your pocket until you want it is not friendship, whatever you tell yourself. We met them earlier, and the awkward part, the part that sticks, was that the man making the argument loudest was a manipulative old villain using it as a con, and even so, buried inside his bad faith, there was a real question that nobody in the world ever quite answers. It just gets left there, the way the inside of the ball gets left there, unexamined, because examining it would spoil the nice time everyone is having. And then there is the box. This is the bit I think about more than is healthy. You can only carry 6 creatures with you at once. Everything else you catch, every extra, every one you scooped up because you needed a particular type for a particular afternoon, gets sent away. Sent through a computer system that a cheerful man named Bill invented, into storage, into a box. And there they sit, stored as data, asleep, in a machine, sometimes for years, sometimes forever, because you caught your 31st identical bird for a task and then never thought about it again. There are trainers walking around this world with hundreds of living creatures filed away in a computer that they will never once take out. A whole, silent population, boxed, waiting on a hard drive for an afternoon that is not coming. Nobody in the games treats this as sad. It is just the inventory system. But I have never been able to look at a full storage box without feeling like I have walked into a very quiet room I was not meant to see. So the ball, in the end, is the thing the whole world agrees not to look at too closely, which is a strange fate for the thing the whole world is built on. And maybe that is the most human detail in all of Pokemon. Not the gods, not the ghosts. The small red and white object we all hold without thinking, that we have decided collectively and without discussing it, simply not to wonder about. It sits in the palm, familiar and closed, and most nights that is a comfort, and only sometimes if you turn it over in the dark, is it anything else? Here is a question. The games are very careful never to ask directly, and once it occurs to you, it does not really leave. What do the people in this world eat? You never see much of it. There are cafes with little cups of coffee. There is a whole thing about curry, cooked over campfires in one of the newer regions. There are berries growing on bushes and bread, and the odd bowl of noodles. It all looks lovely and vegetarian and safe, the way food in a children's world is supposed to look. But there is meat in this world too. There are restaurants serving proper dinners, and the meat has to come from somewhere, and the somewhere is the one door the games keep gently closed. Most of the time, because every so often, usually by accident, the door swings open a crack, and you get a look at the kitchen, and it is a stranger place than the bright town square would ever let on. The clearest look comes in Giotto, in a small town called Azalea, built over a well full of a slow pink dopey creature called slowpoke. Slowpoke are sacred there, more or less. There is an old legend that a slowpoke's yawn once ended a drought, so the town lets them wander about underfoot and treats them kindly, and then the villains arrive, and what the villains do is climb down into the well and cut the tails off the slowpoke, because a slowpoke's tail, it turns out, is a delicacy, sweet apparently, and rich, and worth an enormous amount of money to the right buyer. There is even a man loitering up the road, trying to sell a single tail for a sum so large the game will not physically let you carry that many coins. And the whole episode is framed correctly as an atrocity. You go down there and you stop it. You drive the tail cutters out, and the rain comes back, and it is one of the clearer moral moments in the early games. Cutting bits off the sacred animal to sell to a gourmet is villainy. Full stop. And then, and this is the part that unsettles me far more than the crime did, the later games just put slowpoke tail on the menu. Casually. A few regions along, in the sunny tropical one, you find it listed as a dish, peppered on a salad. In the cold northern region, they cook it into curry and give it a jaunty little pun of a name. Nobody frames it as a crime anymore. Nobody sends a hero down a well to stop it. It is simply lunch, sitting on a shelf between the sandwiches, treated with about as much moral weight as a packet of crisps. The exact same act that was an outrage worth a whole story arc becomes, 2 games later, a special of the day, and not one character so much as raises an eyebrow. The world quietly took a vote when we were not looking and decided it was fine. I find that drift far more disturbing than the original tail cutting because it is so recognisable. That is exactly how it goes with us too. The horror becomes the habit, becomes the menu, and nobody remembers being appalled. The best example, though, the one that is almost too neat, is a duck. There is a creature called Farfetch'd, a slightly cross-looking wild duck that walks around carrying a single stalk of leek, a spring onion held like a treasured possession. It guards that leek with its life, and Farfetch'd is rare, properly rare, hard to find, its numbers thin. And the reason its numbers are thin, spelled out plainly in an old catalogue entry, is that it is delicious. Especially, the entry says, when cooked with leek, which is to say it has been hunted to the edge of vanishing precisely because it makes such a good meal, served with the very vegetable it insists on carrying everywhere. The creature brings its own seasoning to its own extinction, and that is not an accident of translation, it is baked into the name. Farfetch'd comes from an old saying about a duck that comes waddling up to you already carrying the spring onions to cook it with, an image that means a stroke of almost suspiciously convenient luck, a meal that arrives and prepares itself. So the whole creature, name and design, and sad little dwindling population is built as a very dark, very dry joke. A cute duck that is, on inspection, a walking dinner that supplies its own recipe. I think that is a properly bleak thing to hide inside a friendly cartoon animal, and I cannot help admiring the nerve of it. Once you have noticed all this, you cannot switch it off, and the world fills up with quiet little confirmations. The milk you buy to heal your team comes plainly from a cow-like creature you also keep as a pet and a fighter. The honey you use as bait is made by a swarm you could just as easily have caught and battled. The fishermen on the piers are presumably fishing for something, and it is not rubber ducks. The food chain is the same one we live inside. It is just that the camera is usually, tactfully, pointed the other way, at the badges and the gyms and the bright bit of the story. And I want to be clear, that I do not think the games are being cynical about it or cruel. It is mostly a world made for children, and the food chain is exactly the sort of thing you keep behind the counter in a world made for children. But the fact that it is there at all consistent, waiting for anyone who goes looking, is a big part of why the world feels like a real place, rather than a sweet little diorama. A world where nothing ever eats anything as a toy. A world with a slowpoke tail quietly on the lunch menu and a duck being hunted for tasting good with its own onion is somewhere people really live. It has a kitchen, and the kitchen has a bin, and you're better off not looking too hard into the pot. I mean that fondly, mostly. It is one of the ways this daft, bright world earns the word real. I should confess a small pedantry that took me years to make peace with. The games use the word evolution wrong. What they call evolution is not really evolution at all, not in the Darwin sense, not a species slowly reshaping itself across a million generations. What really happens in these games is that one single creature transforms all at once in the middle of its own life. A caterpillar becoming a butterfly. That is metamorphosis, properly speaking, not evolution. But the wrong word got stamped on it decades ago and set hard, and by now arguing about it makes you the annoying one at the table, so I have quietly let it go. We call it evolution. Fine. It is a lovely thing, whatever we call it, because what it mostly is underneath the flash of light is growth. A creature gets strong enough or old enough or close enough to you, and its body decides it is ready to be the next version of itself. And it changes, and there is no going back. Sometimes the trigger is just strength, the creature crossing some threshold and blooming into something bigger. Sometimes it is a stone. You touch a certain kind of mineral to a certain kind of creature, and the stone's energy reshapes it, which is a strange enough idea if you slow down on it. And sometimes, most strangely of all, the trigger is being handed to someone else. There are creatures in this world that will only transform if you trade them away, if they change owners. As though the act of passing from one person's care into another's is itself the shock that finishes them. I have never fully known what to make of that one. Something about how being given away changes you. But the trigger I love best is the softest one. Some creatures only transform when they trust the person they are with. Not when they are strong, not when you apply a rock. When they are loved and know it. There is a small creature that splits its future entirely on this. Raise it with enough affection and let the change happen while the sun is up, and it becomes a bright, warm, sun-coloured thing. Raise it with that same affection, but let the moment come at night, and it becomes a dark, quiet, moon-coloured thing instead, ringed with markings that glow. The fork in its life is not a stone or a number. It is love, plus the time of day it happened to arrive. I think that might be the most tender mechanic anyone has ever buried in a monster battling game, and it is easy to miss entirely. Which brings me gently to my favourite of all of them, a small brown creature with big ears and a fluffy collar called Evie. Evie is the one the whole idea seems to be built around, and the reason is written into its biology. Most creatures in this world have one settled path. They will become the one thing they were always going to become, and that is that. Evie does not. Evie has, in the words of its own catalogue entries, an unstable, irregular genetic code. A genome that has not finished making up its mind. DNA that is so loosely held that the environment can reach in and finish the sentence, and depending on what happens to it, Evie can become any of 8 completely different creatures. Touch it with a water stone, and it becomes a thing of the sea. A thunderstone, and it is all electricity. Warmth and daylight, the sun one. Warmth and nightfall, the moon one. A leaf, a shard of ice, a particular kind of doting care. 8 forks in the road, and Evie will take whichever one its life pushes it down. It becomes whatever it is given cause to become. And the games are honest, which I appreciate, that nobody knows why. It is stated outright that the reason only Evie has this loose, unfinished genome. This capacity to become almost anything remains a mystery even to the researchers inside the world. It is a loose thread in their own science, left deliberately untied. There is a creature here made entirely out of possibility, and the world simply shrugs and admits it cannot explain it. Two small details about Evie finish me off every time. The first is that, over a long life alongside one person, an Evie's face can slowly drift toward resembling its trainers, which is a quietly devastating thing to write about living beside someone for years. And the second, which lives in one of the gentle sleep-themed corners of the franchise, is the suggestion that a sleeping Evie dreams about which of its selves it is going to become. Rest on that one a while, because it is a lovely place to be at this hour. A creature made of nothing but open futures, curled up asleep, dreaming its way through all the different lives it might grow into, and has not chosen yet. We touched a while back on the dark version of all this, up at the Red Lake in the north, where people worked out how to force a creature to transform before it was ready, dragging the change out of it by machine for the spectacle. That is the shadow this casts, because everything about Eve and about the sun and moon creature and about the whole soft business of transformation here is the opposite of that. It is change that comes when you are ready and looked after, not change wrenched out of you on someone else's schedule. The same event, growing into your next self, can be a gift or a violence depending entirely on whether anyone asked you first. And there is a small grief folded into even the gentle version, which is that it only goes one way. You choose the stone, and that is who they are now, and the other 7 possible lives quietly close. All those dreamed of selves the sleeping Evie was turning over, and in the end it gets to be exactly one of them. I will admit something slightly ridiculous. I have never once been able to use an evolution stone without pausing first, without a genuine second of hesitation, as though I were about to make a decision on someone else's behalf that they could never take back. I know it is a cartoon. I know the little creature is thrilled either way. I hesitate anyway, every time. That is evolution in this world when you get right down to it. Less a ladder you climb, and more a series of small, mostly loving choices about who someone is allowed to become, each one gently shutting a door behind it. And that is most of it, or most of the parts that have stuck to me anyway, on the nights I cannot sleep and go wandering back down into the small print of a children's game to see what is still living down there. We started with an egg in the dark, hatching out of nothing, and a god who made the whole universe, and then, by the look of things, got lonely and made company for itself. We passed a dragon that tore itself in two over a disagreement about whether truth or ideals matter more, and never managed to put itself back together. A town that grieves with a tower in it, and a mother whose ghost would not leave, and the children in the woods who came back wearing masks that used to be their faces. A king who has been walking the earth for longer than any person should, carrying the memory of a single flower. A professor who could not manage to say goodbye while alive, and so built a copy to say it afterward. A sun that once gave its light away for free until the day it was broken and turned into a thief. A duck that carries the very thing it will be cooked with. And a small brown creature, asleep somewhere, dreaming about which of its 8 possible selves it is going to grow into. And I said at the start that I did not find all this grim, and I want to land on that gently before we stop. Because for a series about collecting bright little monsters and having them fight in fields, an astonishing amount of it, once you go looking, is about loss, about memory and the people and creatures we cannot let go of, and the stories that wear away in the retelling until the heroes vanish out of them. That could read as bleak. To me it reads as kind. A world that bothers to give grief to a creature nobody thinks twice about, that hides a whole tragedy in the flavour text of a ghost in your bag, is a world that has decided its throwaway monsters are worth taking seriously. That is not cynicism, that is care, tucked where only the people who go looking will ever find it. None of it was ever really hidden. That is the thing I keep landing on. It was only ever under things, in the entries nobody makes you read, and the plaques nobody makes you stop at, waiting patiently for anyone curious enough to crouch down and look. And tonight you have been down there with me for a good long while, in the quiet ocean under the bright surface, and I have enjoyed the company more than I can easily say. So there is nothing to do now, and nothing to remember. Whatever stayed with you out of all this, and whatever has already slipped away as you have been drifting off, is exactly the right amount. Nothing here is a test, it never was. It all started with an egg in the dark, an ordinary small thing in an enormous quiet, becoming something. And that is not the worst place in the world to fall asleep from. Rest well. I will be here, somewhere under things, whenever you cannot sleep again.